I don't.
Are we recording?
We're recording.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the work session for February 25th. Apologize for the delayed start. The first thing we're going to do tonight is we're going to hear a presentation by Tectonic Engineering regarding the Upper Minkle Dam findings report. Welcome.
Good evening.
Hello.
All set?
We're ready.
We're ready for
You're on.
Sounds great. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm Mark Lukasik with Tectonic Engineering. We've been working at this dam since about 2012. We initially were brought on by the town for a series of inspections and then ultimately a series of analyses for these dams. In about 2009, New York State changed their regulations regarding dams and dam safety, really in response to a number of disasters that happened outside the state of New York. And the principal change that impacted this facility was a concept called an engineering assessment. And that process required owners of certain dams to take a long, hard look at these facilities and understand the condition that they're in and whether they are sufficient to continue as they are currently constructed, or do they need, modifications, amendments, improvements, etc., in order to continue to serve their intended purpose and function. I'm gonna go with this. All right, so Upper Minkle Dam is just barely in the town of Newcastle, right over the line from Ossining, and immediately upstream of Lower Minkle Dam. So, amazing how that works. You're basically looking at a 3-acre water body that is sitting just north of the town line. It was set somewhat arbitrarily as a Class B intermediate hazard dam originally. And just so that you have orientation, a Class A dam, low hazard dam, basically means it's a low risk in the event that it were to be lost. High hazard is what it states. If there were to be a loss of that dam, there's a reasonable expectation there would be a loss of life. Class B is right down the middle, most likely damage to property and or critical infrastructure. So we started the engineering assessment process in 2014. We came to an initial conclusion of it could be a B, could be a C. There were a couple things that the town could have done to explore that further. However, your hand was really forced by the work that was done at Lower Minkle Dam, which decided that that dam was in fact a high hazard dam.
So the classification doesn't have to do with the likelihood that it's going to fail. The classification has to do with the loss of property or livelihood or whatnot if the dam were to fail.
Correct. It's
Okay.
if it fails,
Yeah.
what happens.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. So once Lower Minkle Dam was upgraded to a high hazard dam, essentially what you were faced with was if your dam, Upper Minkle Dam, were to fail, it would reasonably be expected to have an impact, a cascading impact on that lower facility. And because that one already had the potential to cause loss of life, you inherited that risk. So as a result, in 2015, we were forced to recommend the upgrade from intermediate to high hazard, and the state has now recognized that this dam is a high hazard dam as it sits
I
today.
assume that there's lots of high hazard dams in Westchester County.
There are.
Right,
You are
like-
not the only one.
Right, well, I mean, Kensico Dam, I would assume if that were to fail would be catastrophic. Catastrophic, right? So there's plenty of, it's about my question is the likelihood of failure versus just what would happen if it fails.
Right, and the magnitude, unfortunately, all high hazard dams are high hazard dams, and there are definitely degrees of hazard. And this would not be on the level of one of the DEP's dams. Were those to fail, yes, you're right, widespread, unmentionable damage, sure. Here, the risk really is this dam collapses, it splashes water onto the lower water body, it then causes water to go over the top of Lower Minkle Dam, and that will then cascade down into the village of Ossining. So if that continues to sustain in a large storm, you're going to have this, you know, domino effect of sorts. But yes, you're right. I mean, it's just the scale and the comparison of the two. It just doesn't exist. But they're both called high hazard dams. And what does that really mean? If it's a high hazard dam, it means that you're held to a larger standard. If you choose to keep this dam, the engineering that's required to go into that facility. Because the idea here is, okay, if you are a risk, then you should be able to insure against that risk through various engineering standards and plans and accommodations and assumptions.
Thank you, that's
All
good.
right. So for orientation, the dam itself is right smack in the middle of this graphic. You are in the air over the water body looking at the crest of the dam. The face of the dam, the stones, and the buttressing are not visible here. They're pointed away, basically into the screen from what you're seeing here. The main feature that is in question here is that masonry dam that holds back the majority of the water. There are two embankments and dikes to the south and east, which largely, the south one essentially follows the town line with Ossining and Newcastle, and the east one is a relatively small structure that lines up against the ditch in the forest. Those two structures are essentially concrete and earth, relatively straightforward in their construction. The masonry stone dam, Upper Minkle Dam, is largely construction of a lot of rubble, boulders. It does have essentially a face on the lake side to kind of keep the water from passing through the individual stones themselves. And it's got a couple buttresses on the downstream face to try and keep it in position. Up on top, there's a concrete cap that you can walk across. If you go out, there's also about an 8-foot spillway there, which is, we didn't have to do too much math to figure out that it's just not enough out there. But it's there. And that really is the feature that you have. As I said before, you've got about 3 acres of water, surface area for the water, and just talking with Bob before he did some quick back of the envelope math, and you do have about 5 million gallons worth of water that are in the water body itself.
We were close, right?
Has the dam ever been breached? Has the spillway ever been used?
So yes, so we believe that the spillway has seen water flowing through it.
Okay.
Breaching is generally a term that is meant to imply that some water is flowing through the structure and some
okay. Alright,
sort of
so-
compromise is happening to the structure. There's no real indication that there's been any past significant failures with this dam. There may very well have been water overtopping the dam, too much, a very large storm, water rising too quickly, that can certainly happen, particularly when the spillway that's out there is so insignificant. But we've seen evidence of water running down the spillway, clearing out debris and things like that from there iteratively. As part of the engineering assessment that we did in 2013, 2014, we did find that the dam is leaking. You go through a dry season out here, not only is the water evaporating, but it's lowering a lot faster than it ought to. And there is evidence down the downstream face of this dam that there is water passing through the structure.
Right, we saw water on the.
Yeah, and that frankly is to be expected for this type of structure, particularly how it is constructed with its upstream face, with a little bit of concrete back there, which is, cracking over time, and water finds its way through those cracks. One of the key things that we have to do as engineers when we're doing the assessments is to make an assessment on the stability. If it's a triangle of earth, and we know the contents of the earth, it's fairly easy math. This is a pile of rocks, it's very difficult mathematically to model what's happening and to say with any definition whether this structure is stable. The Army Corps of Engineers comes up with a number of requirements and methodologies in which we're supposed to follow, a number of cases that we're supposed to study, whether there's ice, how high is the water, those types of events. On a structure like this, it is challenging math. And during the engineering assessment, it was found that it's very hard to say whether this is truly stable in seismic and ice loading events. That what it means is that there are a lot of stones that are propped up buttressing the face of this dam, and they may need to be reinforced and or looked at with a greater degree of mathematics and analysis if you were to try to bring this up to a high hazard dam compliant case.
And that
so-
buttressing would then give you the reassurance that the wall of the dam wasn't crumbling?
Well, the wall of the dam is not crumbling at this time. I mean, it's essentially what you see out there is a lot of stones, and they're arranged in a particular way, in a particular fashion. But what we do have to, the state wants you to make definitive statements, and it can be hard to do that
Yeah.
when these structures are so handcrafted,
Yeah.
as what you have
Right.
out there. It's it is not a uniform piece of construction out there now.
So we did notice a date on it of 1915?
It's been out there. And it's, so one thing that is nice is it's made it over 100 years.
Yes, it is.
It's seen a lot out there, and that is a very good sign for it. But what makes these things work is care and maintenance and upkeep. And the other thing that does happen is every state has it, everyone writes regulations. Everybody decides that the math is newer and better and more improved. And over time, the numbers that the engineers are forced to throw at these structures get, greater and more complex. And these analyses keep growing and growing and growing. And nothing has changed with the dam. When it was built in 1915, it was, with a certain set of assumptions. And the rain was the same in theory, but now the mathematics and the regulators put bigger questions on it. At the end of the day, what it means is if you wish to keep this facility, there's a lot of math that goes into that process. So one of the first things that we did look at was what would it take to upgrade this dam? And really what we felt right off the bat was you had to make an immediate choice with the water. I mentioned before you have an 8-foot spillway. The spillway is the part of the dam that conveys the water during the storm. You need about 30 feet of spillway to convey the water that you need to if you lower the water by 2 feet. So right away, we're already saying, okay, if we're gonna bring this thing up into the state of the art, we're gonna have to lose a little lake. We also looked at, well, okay, maybe 2 feet of water is too much. If we took off 1 foot of water, what kind of spillway would we need? It's about 70 feet long. 70 feet.
Thank you.
So it's a significant difference from the 8-foot spillway that you have out there now. Keeping the water surface where it's at now and going to a high hazard dam was not looked at with any great degree, only because it's another facility, it's another solution, it's almost another configuration of a dam out there. You'd be placing fill all kinds of places to try and hold all that water back over this old dam structure. So we do have to address the seepage, the water that's moving through the dam now in a slow fashion. We do have to improve the upstream face of that dam. And we do need to create a low-level outlet that is functional. What that is essentially the ability to drain the dam by operating the valve, or drain the impoundment, the lake behind. Right now, there is a low-level structure on this dam, but it does not function. So if you were to wish to remove the water from behind it, you really have two choices. You could try to pump it, which would be very energy intensive, or you could essentially construct a siphon. And we've provided the town with information on how to provide that should that be necessary. So Your other choice that we looked at is to remove the dam. And decommissioning of a dam is also an engineering process. It's one that involves looking at what happened, how do you safely and carefully remove a dam, but also what do you leave behind? And how is that done in a way that is compatible with the environment that's around it and is achievable to all stakeholders, the people that live around it, the community that's paying for it, and the downstream folks who are in the town of Ossining immediately to the south. Decommissioning of the dam does not mean you have to remove everything, just you really have to remove enough so that it no longer holds back the lake behind. You do have a watershed. When it rains, water runs off the upstream area and into this water body. That will continue to happen. So you do need to have a place through the lake bed now for that water to continue to flow, so that it continues Purdy Pond and then downstream ultimately to the Hudson River. When we were in 2016 and then ultimately did a quick revision in 2017, we tried to compare the costs of these, two approaches, escalating those dollars here into 2020. You can see that the total cost is approaching $2 million if you want to upgrade this facility to meet the standards of a high hazard dam. Alternatively, if you wish to decommission the dam, it's in the range of $1.2 million there to go through that process.
I'm sorry, forgive me, this may be a very naive question. If you go through the process of upgrade to compliance for Class C dam, are you still a Class C dam after you've done the upgrade? So you're still a high risk?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
The risk is still there.
It's potential
It's-
impact if it
So
Yeah.
so the engineering
There's nothing,
isn't
but there's
really-
nothing that can be done to lessen the impact downstream were the dam to fail. That's not a part of the process?
So decommissioning the dam will definitely lessen the downstream impact. You will
Right.
no longer hold back the lake, therefore you no longer pose a risk to overtopping Lower Minkle Dam.
Right, okay.
We did look at how much of a lowering of the dam could you go through to the point where you could fail that very short dam
Yeah.
and then not harm
Exactly,
Lower Minkle
right,
Dam.
yeah.
And it becomes a very ridiculous structure. At that point, it's
Yeah.
basically 2 feet high.
Yeah, okay.
At that point, so yes, I understand the question, and
I'm just thinking of our
it's
neighbors, more than I am
iteratively,
about us.
mathematically,
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
becomes
right.
a process.
What strikes me, I think, and probably most of the people here, is that upkeep cost of $260,000. That's an enormous
Huge.
amount of money, as opposed to $16,000. It's astronomical.
Well, there is going to be additional costs for dam decommissioning, in all fairness, and that is.
But it's not the initial cost. I mean, there's certainly a
Right,
big
right,
difference, don't get me wrong.
but in addition to the dam decommissioning, is going to have to be a substantial replanting
Right.
of the area that would not be involved
Fair.
if we had upgraded,
Fair, but
yeah,
the issue
no,
is
no.
$244,000
Your point
roughly
is
a
very
year
well taken, I just
that this
want
town
to,
has
in all
to
fairness,
find.
there are additional funds.
And it probably wouldn't cost $600,000.
I'm confident we can probably do it.
Do we have do we know the annual cost today of maintaining the existing dam to have as a comparison?
What is our monitoring costs? I know that Bob and Terry have been trained or in the midst of being trained by Tectonic
To try to save some money
to
on
try to save some
inspections.
money on the town side because of the enhanced monitoring that's been required of us because of the classification and also the condition of the dam.
My point being,
I don't know what the
that
price is,
the
but-
annual cost may be negligible, cause we would have had a,
Well, would it
That
be
would
negligible? I
cost-
still would rather save $244,000 a year if it was, even if it was $243,000.
And the other
Yes.
thing is that with this, we still don't, even with the compliance to Class C, we still can't get insurance.
Right.
So we have no liability
So,
insurance.
but then how does it says right here that the annual cost includes insurance, so that actually doesn't include insurance then in the?
Once you have a compliant facility, a carrier will pick you up.
I see.
If you plant, don't we have to maintain that, and that comes with a cost?
Just
We-
in all fairness, I
Yeah,
think we
no, no,
have
no,
to
we-
compare real costs, right?
Well,
I mean, I don't know what kind of cost there is to maintain what would be forest and swamp and wetlands.
Wetlands and
Yeah,
things like
as
that.
opposed, it would be
No, that
vastly
would be
different
something
numbers.
our parks would come in and take care of. We would wanna restore it, but yeah, you're right, I mean, along with the planting, we have to make sure it establishes and thrives, so yeah,
And if I
absolutely.
understand right, having a class C isn't a concern. The concern is a class C that doesn't meet the standards, the safety standards, right? A class C is okay, as long as it's safe.
So one thing,
So we change the map again.
so one thing, just to clarify, in that annualized cost there, the $260,000 cost, one thing I want to point out is a dam is generally thought to have about a 50-year design life. And you know, if you kind of look through history, it's a pretty reasonable estimate that someone came up with somewhere along the line. Because after about 50 years, you do see the same scenario that you got going on now. Different rules, different regulations, different math, more science, what have you. After about 50 years, you have to improve it again. You have to make it a little bigger, the spillway may need to be larger, that sort of thing. So in that number is essentially a reserve cost over time, looking ahead to what you would have to essentially be working toward and your future bills that you will continue to have as long as you are keeping this dam here and maintaining this high hazard dam in its position and in service. So there's yes, there are definitely the simple, straightforward, easy to comprehend things like, okay, this year I need to do an inspection, this year I need to go out there and repoint the masonry work, this year I need to go out and remove trees and vegetation that are impinging on the dam. But you're also going to, if you choose to continue to keep this dam, you have to continue to maintain state of the art, maintain pace with the regulations as they continue to change as well. There's not a static environment surrounding the facility.
Do we have a sense of if the water body itself is growing? So would it continue to grow and become a larger pond, lake, what have you, over the course of 50 years?
I would say, no, not at this point. I mean, everything that we've seen on the perimeter is relatively stable.
Yeah, okay.
The slopes are stable around the edges of the pond, the community that there is what it is. The depths are most likely, the clear depth in the lake is most likely decreasing just through sedimentation over time, if anything. So the water surface is fairly stable, but the volume is probably slowly decreasing. But other than that, I think it's a fairly static environment. We did put in a couple photos through here of what decommissioning does look like in varying degrees. The first one here we chose because the impoundment and the lake itself are somewhat similar. You can almost imagine yourself standing on Upper Minkle looking back across the lake now and seeing a similar environment there, tree-lined, placid water surface. This was a bit more of a rectilinear dam up in Massachusetts. It was removed in stages because it had a very large watershed behind it. So they couldn't really get at this in a terribly controlled fashion. If you had a large storm behind you, the water would be rushing right back in. So what you see in the left photo is essentially half the dam that was in the former photo has been removed, and you can see the water is gone, and you see the channel and the invert of the lake below. You also see what can happen when one of the storms rips through. As they were in the process of decommissioning, you can see that the lake bed naturally revegetated itself to the one side. Then a large storm came through in the upper reaches and scoured away some of that sediment. All what is happening here in these photos is essentially downstream impacts. These are things that you definitely want to avoid with what you're doing. You do not want to be a bad neighbor. If you do get into this scenario, you want to do this in a controlled fashion. And the thing that you have in your favor here is the watershed upstream of your dam is small. So you're not gonna go at it in this particular manner. Here is one up in Phillipstown. It's a state facility. They went through the process of designing a decommissioning for their dam. Only, just as they were about to go out to construction, a storm got them, took it out. So they went through all the work, they did everything right, they had a grand plan for what they were going to do, and they got tripped at the finish line. So what they did was they chose to revegetate their interior. They did a relatively straightforward, essentially meadow plantings. This was a large interior. There was a long duration would be required to reforest the entire interior of where this facility was. But it does point out the fact that these are complex facilities and they are subject to large storm events. We have another one that was in Clarkstown. It was a low hazard dam, somewhat smaller than what you have here. It too was taken out in an extreme event, but what I wanted to point out was only 2 or 3 weeks later, after this dam went down in a large storm, you're already seeing Mother Nature coming back on the interior on its own. Nature finds a way very, very quickly in these instances. So there was a brief statement before. We definitely think you want to go at this in a controlled fashion when you're taking these dams down. You want to have a plan. You want to manage your sediments, and you want to have control over what goes back from a vegetation standpoint. You want to put back a community that's compatible and reasonable if you go ahead with a decommissioning approach. So, after pointing out kind of some of those visual instances of what that looks like in its initial stages, here's what, if you wanted to proceed with decommissioning, it might look like here. The first step that we do is we lower the water. We'd use a siphon, which would essentially use gravity to remove the water from behind. We would take down the stonework that's there, the dam that's there now. We would take down as much as the town decided. If you could go the minimal amount, which is essentially a regulatory definition, a little bit of how it restricts flow. Or if you didn't like the fact that you were leaving behind piles of rocks, you could remove all the rocks. Take it down from that standing structure to essentially a more gently sloping rock pile, in and around the general vicinity of the existing dam. What you would build is a small flow control device just at the center, right where the channel is now. The idea that in our minds that you want to do is to really make as little work as possible when it comes to removing things from this site. You've got a lot of stone in there, use it. You can move it around a lot easier than you can haul it away. You will definitely want to reestablish a channel. There is a watershed upstream, you need to get the water through this former lake bed. And the sediments that are there, you want to keep them on site, particularly as the state has changed their rules regarding a lot of these materials. These materials are here, they should stay here, and they can be managed here, and they can be managed in a reasonable way. And lastly, from an erosive standpoint, you want to get all your vegetation reestablished. We recommend that you go ahead and do that in a way that is as harmonious and compatible with the environment that is around the fringe of the lake now. There we go, back up. So the reason that we don't want to truck things out of here in any great quantity is because it's very hard to get into where this dam is located. There's private property immediately adjacent to the masonry structure itself, just over the line in the town of Ossining. Your first resident has the dam right in their backyard. They also have one of the dikes immediately behind their house. You have potentially a little opportunity for some access from Croton Dam Road. You also have potentially access through the community complex with the town of Austin. However you slice it, nobody wants trucks and trucks and trucks going back and forth through all those areas. So obviously permission will be required, easements will have to be negotiated, all those types of things to do any type of work, whether you're reconstructing it or decommissioning it. All those elements have to be factored in. But work will be in immediate proximity to residents. This is a out-of-the-way location when it comes to roads and infrastructure for transportation. So what we have done in the coming slides here is kind of outlined how you can restore the former lake bed into a community that is viable and potentially one that is even desirable. The outline that's, I don't know what color we want to call that, off blue, all around the perimeter is the water surface as it is today. On the darkest blues on the interior, you have the opportunity to create a couple small pools. These would really be held back by the natural topography. There would no longer be a dam structure holding them back. They're most likely easily formed from the lake bed itself. Based on how the topography pinches and pulls as it moves in a linear fashion, you're able to create the opportunities to stand water in those areas. And then the lighter colors on the perimeter are essentially going to be indicative of wetland and emergent communities that can transition from a little bit of standing water out to an area that would be compatible with the surrounding forest. Again, that off blue color is about 3 acres in size. The former dam location would be at the left hand side there, and largely, as I said before, that area could really be occupied with the residual stones that were taken down from the former dam structure. Kind of looking at it in a long-term kind of vision planning view. 10 years on, after vegetation has a chance to establish, trees have a chance to establish and grow, you really have the forest coming in toward the water, and a couple key, again, little natural pools in the center to be the focal point of what used to be the lake.
Can I just ask out of curiosity, was this a hand rendering or was this done by computer? I'm just curious, because this takes me back to the 80s. And I mean that in a good way, when we used to employ draft people to actually create, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, a lot of these renderings that are in here were put together by our subconsultant, One Nature. They're a firm located in Beacon, and they pride themselves on developing compatible communities and employing a lot of native species and creating the new ecosystems, really, is what this is potentially an opportunity to create.
Watercolor drawings, which are nice. Thank you.
Just looking at a linear section through it, the uplands into the preserve or the riparian forest size, we have those micropools where you see emergent wetlands and the second pool is largely where the dam exists today. Purdy Pond downstream in the town of Ossining is beyond. Looking in cross section, again an area that's more riparian, the upstream end to the north, intermittent streams, the forest on the edges, marshes on the interior near the water. The micropools themselves could be developed as shown on the bottom section. The next series of slides, pretty much a walk from the micropools that would be in the center of the former Lakewood, and then working your way kind of across and up into the woods, kind of toward the adjacent residences that are along Croton Dam Road. And so here, you know, this is real life micropool. And the adjacent, in the foreground, you have the emergent wetlands. Similar type of scenario here. The difference, what you see here is a lot of old growth forest. Those trees themselves will take years to establish. Those will not be what come out of the nursery. This is probably a fairer example of what the shoulder area would look like after a few years. These, you know, different types of vegetation that can appear. As you get closer to the homes that are along Croton Road, you'll start to transition to you know, drier ground, more erect vegetation. You'll be able to plant this area with trees now. In the initial years after construction, the edges of the pond will look a bit like this with a few small trees scattered in there. But 10-15 years beyond, it'll start to look more like this as you reach the edge in the mature forest that exists today. As we were alluding to before, it is an opportunity for passive recreation. You know, if you've gone and created this ecosystem out there, there is a chance you have the reserve, which is immediately adjacent. If you're so inclined, you can add a path in and around through this area. It would require you to, you know, do a bit of maintenance. You'd have to, you know, kind of cut back and manage the encroaching vegetation over time, so that it didn't become an area that was difficult to navigate. But you know, it has the potential to become an asset in that corner of the reserve. So that's that.
So,
Kind of top to bottom, that's, you know, really a quick synopsis of the
light reading.
150 or so pages of a report that was put together really with, the town had a lot of foresight and a lot of opportunity to go in and get a grant through the Hudson River Estuary Program, which provided a lot of funding for that study. And it really gave the town opportunity to see, you know, what their options might be in terms of, you know, trying to hang on to this dam. What does that effort look like? What does that expense look like? What does that responsibility look like? And if that is not of interest, what might it look like to go ahead and decommission a dam, and what could you do with what you have left behind? So if you have questions, if there's topics, if you had a chance to look through this over the years and you have something that's on your mind, we can try to answer those questions.
So, if I'm a Lower Minkle Dam neighbor, and we decide to decommission, what type of a plan is put in place? What type of, you know, assurances that we don't negatively impact any of the condos that are in that area? That, I mean, when you're standing on the, you know, the dam now and you're looking, forgive my directions, west, fine, good. You know, there are beautiful condos there, and there is the Lower Minkle Dam that you can see, and you certainly, you know, wouldn't wanna negatively impact them in any way. So, I mean, is this a, you know, is this like a dangerous operation that we're gonna negatively impact them? Is this, you know, how do we make sure that none of that happens?
Sure. No matter what you do, the first thing that you're doing is you're managing the water level behind the dam. So any construction essentially is going to warrant the removal of the water surface. So the water level will be removed. Whatever, you will immediately make provisions for the water to continue to remain low throughout the course of construction. So the scenarios in some of those other pictures that were in there where large storms hit and, you know, midstream or right as they were ready to go, you know, those scenarios are mitigated. So in terms of the risk of the unintended consequence of water discharge, that can definitely be controlled. The other concern is the sediment itself. You wanna manage that in a smart way too. And so you want to get your sediments that are in those lake beds now away from the erosive forces of the water. So you're gonna scoop those out and you're gonna put those in a place where they're no longer going to be subject to being mobile. So they'll stay on the property, they won't be washing into the downstream water bodies or even going downstream from there. So those are really the two key things that you want to plan for, and they're gonna be part of any solution that you do out here.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. You told us there's 5 million gallons in this water body today, and we're saying we're gonna decrease by,
Granted,
in the event of decommissioning, if we were to make the decision to decommission, you decrease by 1 or 2 feet regardless. So how many, I guess my question is, how many gallons of water are going to trickle downstream toward the lower Minkle Dam? And how would they then accommodate that?
Okay, so if we keep the dam, and we remain a Class C high hazard dam, we improve it to be able to handle the requirements that the state has for that. We'll lower the water surface by 1 or 2 feet.
Yeah,
So-
I'm asking
so
about
it'll-
if we're,
so
I'm asking
right.
about if we're decommissioning.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just to make sure that
Yeah,
I'm following where we're going. So there'll still be water behind the dam if we keep it.
yep,
It'll just be a little bit less than this
Right.
today. If we decommission it,
right,
there will no longer be a standing water body
yep,
behind the dam.
yep.
It will largely be wetlands,
I know,
woods,
I'm
what have
saying,
you.
what
Where does that
happens
water
to the
go?
5 million reduced by
That-
2 feet?
Right, well, over the course of 2 weeks, you can reasonably lower the water surface that you have out there today without any adverse impacts downstream.
In 2 weeks?
Reduce
Over
it
the-
to, reduce it to
over-
what? To
To all 5
Nothing?
million or
Yeah, to take it all out.
what?
yeah, that's what he's saying.
So how does the lower dam accommodate for that?
That, over the 2 weeks, that's a very reasonable amount of time, it's a very small amount of water as far as the downstream comes. I know it's 5 million gallons, it sounds like a lot of water,
It sounds like a lot of water.
It's very manageable.
It's a lot of water.
So if I'm the town of Austining, I'm gonna need like a lot of explanation about how that works, because just, you know, I'm not an engineer, so from a layperson's perspective, hearing that 5 million gallons of water, even in a slow trickle, even over 2 weeks, are headed towards my Class C dam that exists in my town is something that's going to make me very nervous. And possibly even mad at my neighbors in Newcastle. So how do we mitigate that?
Sure. Happily, it's solvable by math. It's easy to show, to demonstrate what the changes are. It's an insignificant change in the water surface itself. It is very compatible with the inflow from the watershed upstream itself. On your average day, it's very, very similar to what's happening out there now. So with the permit process that happens with the DEC from dam safety, from the region standpoint, from the Army Corps standpoint, from how that process is documented, how those permits are reviewed, there's quite it's taller than this document,
Yeah.
worth of information, calculations, reports, studies, etc., to show
Okay.
that the downstream can receive this water without any adverse impact. It will be demonstrated, and it's reasonable, and it's very
I
straightforward.
love it, okay.
So in 1915, a group of people decided to commission and build the dam as it is, for some purpose. So now we're saying that purpose is no longer necessary? Right? What was the purpose in 1915 to create this dam?
in their backyard,
Is that it? Is that the?
or to irrigate crops, or I don't know.
Yeah, we actually had a resident who did it along Croton Dam Road not that long ago, and just decided that they didn't want marsh in their backyard, decided to Byron Lake, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Byron Lake
yeah.
Road, yes. And created a dam and a little lake, and boy, did we get all sorts of attention from the DE.
But to that point, right, the people who live off of Croton Dam Road, so these people who we're talking about today, they bought homes with a pond in their backyard.
Right.
And now they may not be supposed to use that pond for any purpose, but they bought homes with a bond. So one of the things that I think that we absolutely need to consider is this notion that, and I wrote it down when you said it, that it could be potentially desirable. What, you know, the growth that comes in that would be potentially desirable. I think we need to, you know, make a commitment to our residents and to the town that it's not potentially desirable, that it is in fact desirable. And so, you know, this is located within a Newcastle park.
Yeah, it's
I think there's a lot of opportunity here to make something that is not just potentially desirable, but truly
Desirable.
beautiful
Oh,
and
completely with
wonderful
you.
and, you know,
Yes.
has native plantings and wildlife habitat and
We
could
are
do
so
a
lucky that we have the
beautiful job.
conservation board here because they are just the prime people to take and assist us to oversee it. Are you a neighbor?
I am absolutely a neighbor, and
Oh, so glad you're here.
I'm dying here. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
I'm
no.
trying so hard to follow protocol, I'm doing a fabulous
No,
job.
you're doing fabulous.
I have to tell you just a couple of quick things.
Sure, please.
Thank you. Number one, thank you, because I realize we're all trying to gather data and make a wise choice. Number two, I think it's extremely important that when we look at the numbers, we don't just look at decommission versus fixing. We have to look at decommissioning plus planting.
Yes,
Nurseries are
completely,
expensive.
yes, without question.
I hear, I love what this woman just said, because yes, potentially desirable, perhaps in 20 years when my grandchildren come over, it'll be a nice place. For the next 15 years, I don't wanna live next to a swamp. I really don't, none of us do, and I'm so grateful that we're considering those people who were in those last couple of houses in Newcastle before we hit Ossining, because those are our homes. You know, for 20 years
And
I've
do
been-
before you leave, please leave me with your name and
Absolutely.
address and contact information.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
sure.
We'd
I
love
mean,
to-
I'm right there.
Perfect.
I'm not down, 203 is where the access was. Thank you for not trying to drive through my backyard because those arrows are so close. But I'm cooperative and reasonable and resourceful. I'm on our, I want what's best for everybody. And I'm very grateful that we're considering all that. I'm glad I'm not gonna be next to a swamp in a year. Thanks.
No, I mean, we walked it,
We walked
it yesterday, and I walked the whole, all of Sunny Ridge Preserve, I walked every single trail there, and I came back and I cornered Dennis, and I said, you gotta come see this place, cause it's like fabulous. So I think that the opportunities that exist here are what we need to explore, if we make this decision to decommission, we then need to have a subsequent step where we're really thinking about how do we create something that's really beautiful over there.
Can I ask a curiosity question from some of the other projects, because, I'm gonna use the word wetland, although swamp does have a classification for some of the Cowarden system. So, with any system that's been allowed to sort of develop an equilibrium over an extended period of time, so understandably you have to drain, right, what's there in order, let's say hypothetically, to do that work. Before you would dive in with a restoration plan, have any of the other decommissionings allowed sort of a period to, and it would have to be stabilized, but sort of to make determinations where the site is kind of communicating to you where the micro pools wanna be, either based on surface hydrology, groundwater, where those things sort of could, sort of like naturally, because we've run into issues, especially early on with this science, more so for tidal systems, but you sometimes don't realize, maybe
What's there?
sometimes it can communicate to you to help sort of like refine that design, so instead of like fighting what you all agreed to after doing a site walk, after doing designs and whatnot, there's sort of that period that allows for the site to communicate to you, not everything, but some of the things that you're looking to propose, can't believe it hasn't rained for 3 weeks in August and that puddle of water is still there, you know what I mean? So it's like just little things like that you kind of may not get an opportunity to do if you don't allow that period to sort of develop. So I'm just, and if nobody else has, that's fine, because I was just curious.
No, it's
That was
it's
the
an
question.
interesting point, Dennis, because when Bob and I were out there with Ivy the other day, and Lauren, one of the things we were wondering is, do you replant right away, or do you wait to see what it is that you're left with, to be able to then use what's there and enhance it and use the natural, features that are left behind to then take and create something very unique to the place as opposed to coming in with a planting plan and just, figuring that, oh, we'll level it off and we'll just, go do.
Sediment has a seed stock to it, what's gonna.
Just
it's
to
a
see,
whole-
but again, wanna be a little
It's
bit
not easy,
sensitive
but it's
to,
a whole,
to the neighbors that again, I don't want them, looking at, a sediment, dump for, a year, but just trying to figure out, just trying to figure out that balance, but it's interesting, cause we actually had that very same conversation the other day, and I don't know, is there a preference to how you do it, or is there a best practices way of?
Right, but these are all terrific points and they're really all focusing on the key feature that everybody needs to understand, and it sounds like this room has a really good handle on it, it takes time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wetlands in Newcastle, I think.
People start kind of from the outside in, so it seems like if the forest area is gonna be drier, we think most of the time, would you start there, which is really what the neighbors can see more, and then kind of let the inside settle a little more and become a little bit more what it wants to become before we start planting there?
There are definitely a million ways to attack this, but the points are all well taken in that it's a process. It is one that you're gonna have your first passes through where you're essentially kind of doing the earth moving, the sediment management piece to kind of get everything stable. Then you have the opportunities to create what works with the topography and the nature of this site. You can arrange and create the features that make sense, that work with what is evident in what's left behind. And then you factor and layer in the vegetation that in its first season is one thing, in its second season it's been browsed, something's been overtaken, invasives are coming in, you have to come in, you have to manage, you have to reapply, you have to come back and supplement, you have to add in new features over time. It is definitely not the landscape plan, put 500 units over here, 300 units over there, done, we're finished. And cross your fingers, it won't work that way. So I appreciate everybody's understanding that it does take a vision and concerted effort to establish this community. Something will happen by itself, but if you want it to be that asset, it will take work and a
And are
commitment.
those typically in the permit conditions that you receive, with respect to the Corps and DEC, if you're gonna do a restoration plan, or no, it's not like wetland mitigation?
Well, it definitely will have a mitigation component for it, so there will be a time frame for that viability. But chances are, if you want, an asset in your community, you're gonna go above and
But
beyond.
is it permit driven? In other words, do we have to also worry about satisfying
Yes,
other agencies? Okay.
yes,
that was the
absolutely, the
question.
permit component is
Okay.
definitely there.
And the subsequent mitigation for the monitoring of what you, because typically they're a 5-year, at least my experience has been, so, okay.
Yeah, Victoria?
I feel compelled to ask, just due to previous comments that I made to the board about the form-based code. Are the intermittent streams and wetlands, are any of those vernal pools?
Yes.
Do you, could you?
Are you asking me? I don't have the answer.
At this point, we've only looked at the water body itself, so that it's definitely a defined open water. Surrounding, are there vernal pools in the
Preserve, there's
the
certainly.
preserve?
Yeah.
Likely, but they were not the subject of our study.
I'm just, the reason, I'm almost thinking in terms of the person who's a neighbor as well. There are some really fascinating aspects of what happened, would happen there if it turns back into natural wetlands. That may be really appealing to folks who live around there. It may not take as long.
open.
Yeah, and it may not take as long as you think to go back to the natural state.
Well, thank you. I mean, I will tell you, I'm completely open, and I really believe nature is gonna take over here. But I can't help, I'm sitting here thinking, we're talking about building something beautiful, we have something beautiful. And we're not spending a tremendous amount of time, we're not spending much time at all talking about how to bring that to a safe place and keep it. You know, that's all, I just don't hear that talked about a whole lot. I hear, when we get rid of it, what are we gonna do? Like, the decision's been made. If the decision's been made, I can handle the truth, tell me. If the decision hasn't been made, we really need to consider that you have something really beautiful there.
Yeah.
We have something really beautiful there. I'm glad you took the walk, I'm glad you went and saw it. You can't bring that back if you get rid of it, you know, you can't. So, I mean, it's probably a whole lot cheaper to just pave Westchester County. That's not why we live in Westchester County. So, it's just like, seriously.
So, I mean, one of the things that was, and I don't know if you can speak to this or not, or if you wanna speak to this, Nicole, but one of the things that I've been sort of learning through this process and in preparing for this meeting is the environmental benefits associated with decommissioning the dam as well. So, I had thought going into it that it was like one of these like paved paradise sort of scenarios where, oh my god, we're gonna knock down this dam, and then instead of having a beautiful water body, you know, we're gonna have a swamp, we're gonna have a swamp, and it's not, so one of the things that I've been educating myself on is actually that the DEC recommends decommissioning dams from an environmental perspective. I mean, you had sent me some information about fish migration and so there are sort of environmental benefits associated with the decommissioning of dams. Again, thank you. So I don't know if anybody in the room wants to speak to that from an expert perspective, I'm not one, but
So,
one of the reasons.
I mean, originally this was a stream, this was a riparian corridor. These two dams are not natural. They were erected, they were there, they created these two water bodies, they've become, you know, beautiful water bodies, they're deep, they're nice features that are out there now. The community has since developed around these water bodies. You know, things, you know, there's an ebb and flow as it goes through it, but there's benefits to both. There's a process that goes through, I haven't really talked about the permits this evening, but you do have full jurisdiction when it comes to both the Corps and the DEC with these permits. So, you know, that process is looked at from both sides. There's dam safety, which is just a piece of the DEC itself. But in this particular instance, if you choose to maintain the dam safety will lead the way in the process of what you're doing. If you choose to decommission the dam, the region will lead the way from the habitat and environmental permit siding from Article 15 and 24 side from those permits. You know, the core, the mitigation, the wetlands, the loss of the open waters, everybody recognizes, you know, there's a trade-off, and so the whole reason that when you are creating this new ecosystem, if you're going the route of decommissioning, as we alluded just a few moments ago, there's just not just a planting plan. There's a monitoring plan, there's permit conditions that go with it, there's an effort that is made to create a viable community behind, not just check a box on a permit application and say, oh, they had a landscaping plan for their decommissioning and it'll, you know, turn from X to Y. It's a thoughtful process and one that the regulators take seriously, the regulations take seriously because there is a benefit to it and a benefit to the community as a whole.
But I did just wanna circle back to one other thing that you mentioned, which is why are we doing this? So that there's a
understand.
Oh, okay, alright,
No, I understand we need to do something.
We need to do something,
Right, no,
okay,
no, I
right,
get
so
that.
current state is not an option,
I'm just thinking, my son can't fish or he can fish, that's where I'm at, you know, I mean, really, we have something incredible, could we figure out how to keep it safe and keep it nice, or am I gonna live behind a swamp? That's what I hear, I get that you guys don't think that, I get that we're gonna have a beautiful thing, maybe that'll happen. The cost of that might be comparable to the cost of repairing the dam. We need to look at the real numbers, not just decommission or repair. Because decommission, we need to add on the nursery trip.
Yes, yes.
We've all been to the nursery. It's a big number for a thing this big. We need to look at reality. And I appreciate that you're doing it, and I'm happy to help. I'm pretty good with a pen and paper.
We should conclude this portion of it. Jeremy isn't here, I know he wasn't feeling well, and maybe it's worth reserving judgment to get his input.
So, but, okay, and
Yes.
what are the next steps, like what are you guys looking for?
Yeah.
So we would be looking for direction from the board as to whether or not we would either decommission or upgrade. So that we can give direction to Tectonic as to where they go from here.
What, so I'm sorry, I don't understand, what is Tectonic besides this
So
report,
they're our engineer and our consultant in analyzing the dam, and then they would guide us to the next steps of whatever it is that we're gonna go.
Which means what, starting to apply for the permits that you mentioned, or?
So where you sit now is, you put it very succinctly, you cannot leave it alone the way it is now.
Yeah.
You have to do something. So you can either improve it, bring it up to current compliance,
Yeah.
or you can decommission it. And so, as a dam owner, the state of New York, the DEC, has told you you need to do something. And they have asked you, what are you going to do? And they have been very patient, and one thing that this town has been great about is maintaining a line of communication with the state. The state will not wait around forever, but you do continue to keep the pace of communication with them, which is fantastic. So whatever you choose to do, keep that line of communication open. I cannot emphasize that enough. They are looking, the state is looking to the town, what are you going to do with the dam? Are you going to upgrade it, or are you going to decommission it? That's really where you sit right now. At this point in time, you have said to the state, it is here, it's the beginning of 2020, we're ready, we want to make a decision. The time is now, we have looked at a lot of things, and the time is now at hand to decide which direction we're going. So, come summertime, the state's gonna call you back up and say, where are you at with that decision? So that's where you sit right now in the process.
So, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna continue to beat this horse. So I get it, we have to make a decision. I don't get it, what are you going to do next? So when I say.
I'm not doing anything
I
next.
know, but once once
Yeah, yeah.
we tell you, once
Yep.
we say we're in favor of upgrade or we're in favor of decommissioning, what is your next step on this?
So whatever decision happens to go next, whichever path you choose to go, the process is very similar. You enter the permit phase for that solution, and you design at a schematic level, you do the studies that are necessary to document and understand what that design is, and you enter the permit process and you
So it's the
move
permit
through it and go through that, yes.
Okay.
And then you try to fund that solution in whichever way that you want, whether grants or whatever.
Okay, I mean, I can say right now, I don't wanna make a decision about this until you guys have done the outreach that needs to happen to the town of Austining at a minimum. And I think also to the neighbors.
Okay,
So,
well, we
I wanna give them the
tried as we-
opportunity to be heard on this in addition to us.
Absolutely.
That's my.
But it's a long process, and one of the things that we need to do is, if we decide to go the decommission route, what is that going to look like? We're not leaving it like that, there's going to be some planting, so in order for us to be able to make an evaluation as to what the true costs are and what it is that we are presenting to the neighbors and to the community that we're putting there, we need some direction, because that's a decent expense. And it involves planning, so I sort of need some direction from the board. One of the things neighbors are gonna ask us is, what's going to be there in its place? I have nothing to offer them, other, we have
Well, I
some
think we have
examples.
something, to offer them, we have to offer them what we showed tonight and the conversation and the,
Right, but if we're talking about decommissioning, then, these are very basic schematics, as I said, are we doing walkways, are we going,
And how long will it take?
is this the extent of what, the plans are? Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Am I gonna wait 10 years to enjoy that? Because that's
I don't know how long
critical.
any of the things takes, but as he talks about, this takes time and it's not gonna be an overnight thing. And it doesn't matter necessarily how much money we pump into it initially, and it may be a gradual creation of a new system out there with, walking trails and.
Definitely will be.
Yeah, I mean, it's not
Because
gonna
we're not gonna plant a a 50-year-old tree is not
I
gonna look, you know,
understand, but are we gonna
those,
sit
it
back and
will all
watch what
develop.
God sends, or are we gonna go buy something with
Well, I think it's gonna be
football?
something
See,
in
I'm just, you know, I
between.
mean, there's a cost. You know what, I just have one last, I know who Mark is because he introduced himself. Can you guys give me a clue, like, while we're saying we need from you, like, who's the board, who's the town?
Sorry.
You know, I mean, just send
So,
your checks every couple
I'm
of
Ivy
months.
Poole, I'm the town supervisor.
Thank you, Ivy,
Jason Lickenfeld, Town Board.
thank you,
Lauren Levin, Town Board.
thank you.
Lisa Katz, Town Board.
And Jeremy Saland, who was
he
sitting.
he wasn't feeling well, so.
Okay, is there anyone?
I'm Jill Shapiro, I'm the town administrator.
Jill, you saved my neck when the wires came down in front of my house. Saved my neck. Nobody worked as hard as you did. 15 days couldn't go home and kinda, you're the woman. And gave me a pen and paper and a diagram.
Unbelievable.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm sorry, and you are?
Carrie Malloy.
Oh my gosh.
Thank
That's
you.
good.
And it's tax season and I'm here and I'm rationing, so you guys thank you. I'm sorry to just.
We spent a lot of time.
You'll have a lot of experience with Con Ed too.
Yeah, oh no, I couldn't go home. I couldn't go home because you had Con Ed on one side and a pond on the other. I couldn't,
Yeah, this poor woman, oh my gosh, yeah.
I guess I mean, I completely agree with Ivy on this because we're just being presented two options, and to make a decision tonight as to which option is so difficult. Primarily because one, if we do upgrade the dam versus decommissioning the dam, all of the costs are not embedded in this list. This is a pretty, you know, this cost right here looks to me about 30 to 40% off from what the actual number could possibly be. So that's one thing, and the second thing is the folks who are the neighbors, and as far as the routes in which you have to get to the dam, I mean, the consideration of reconstructing it versus decommissioning it, I mean, it's working with Austining, so it really, I mean, do you think that it's realistic to say, can we get all the stakeholders in here in the next month and then make a decision? Like, do you think that a month is too much of a time lapse, or?
No,
I think
we
we should try to do it within 2 weeks. I mean, I think we should, at our next work session, be ready to make a decision about this, and
Well,
Jeremy will be
I
back.
need to be able to reach out to Dana Levin.
She's ready.
Okay.
She's ready to have this conversation.
I need to make sure.
Yeah. Oh.
I am not well versed enough to be able to do this. But we will touch base, so we will
That's fine.
Yeah, we're hoping to do some outreach to Austining. We wanna make sure that we're good neighbors and that we at least acknowledge all of everyone's concerns so that we can address them as best we can. Seems the only fair thing to do.
Just big picture, you're looking at, you know, winter 2021 into spring 2022 would be a reasonable you know, earliest opportunity to be doing construction of anything on this, by the time we went through the permit process and what have you, so you know, procurement of contractors, et cetera. So this is something that, you know, it definitely requires effort, time, to get through the review process and through the design, and ultimately to get a shovel ready to do something. But you know, you're able to get at it and keep on it, keep ahead of steam in this, moving in a forward direction on it, it can lead to a beautiful solution.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Really
so
This
much.
was really fantastic. Thank you for this work.
Thank you.
So, we have the conservation board here.
We do.
We also have Jennifer Metz-Flag here, who's here for the plastic bag
Yep.
Yes.
discussion, and of course, we're running behind, so
Yeah.
I will defer to you. I just wanna take Carrie's phone number because hard to believe we haven't had a storm lately, so I'll probably just change staff. So I don't have her telephone number at the ready.
Thank you. I'll be right back.
What do you want to move to?
Thank you.
Whatever you wanna start with.
I saw you took some interest in that. Yeah. That was good read. Didn't check the structures. Good at all, but I did notice.
Thanks one person.
Sure, sounds good. Let's talk about
Yeah.
that. Let's talk about bags.
Yeah. Well, so if it's okay with the conservation board, we're gonna ask Jennifer to go first on the plastic bag.
I apologize, I didn't know it was gonna take this long, I have to talk to JFK.
Oh, okay, so
Very good.
I'm calling it audible. Karen, you're up.
Thanks, Bob.
We'll we'll just wait until Jill and Lisa get back.
Should we come up or
Sure.
wait? Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's I spent hours with her. Hours with her. She's
So, Dennis?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hello. So, I'm Karen Anton, I'm the chair of the Conservation Board, and here's my board coming up. We're a very active, great board, and we have lots of ideas.
Can I
And-
just ask you to hold off for just
Sure.
1 second until Lisa gets back? I think she.
The rest of it.
Somebody's welcome to come sit in Jeremy's seat. You have to make that, you gotta make that, jokes.
No offense to Jeremy. We'll wait.
That was interesting though, to be able to hear this piece as the conservation board.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What kind of ties in to, well. So, as Victoria was saying, first of all, do you know everyone? Should we all introduce ourselves?
Oh, so I'm Melanie Smith.
I'm Susan Fisher. I'm Sue Meany. Karen Anthony.
Dennis Corelli, environmental coordinator.
Victoria Al's T.
And we have two missing members, Missy Hagel and Lucille Wesley. So, there are a lot of things that we'd probably like to talk about, and given the time limit, maybe it would be helpful if we could come back at some point to also talk about things.
Sure.
But what's interesting is, I've been on the conservation board for a while, and initially, it was really just about open space, the open space inventory. And I forget when, but I asked Dennis to kind of look at some things about the Glacier Arboretum, because we were looking at the trust document to find out more about the funding and what we could do and what was discretion and what was going on. And in doing that, he came up with the resolution of how the Conservation Advisory Council back in 1975 became the Conservation Board. And I don't know how, all of this applies now, but there seems to have been a lot more areas to deal with besides just open space. I think open space became a priority given the time in the mid-70s, and there was the case, developing condos, and people were more getting concerned about open space. But it's interesting because besides open space, we're supposed to look at the preservation of natural resources, assure the preservation of scenic resources, which in some ways is an interesting concept because many times it's not just natural scenic resources, it could be historic road, and there's many different things it could be. And then also in our, whatever we might have to do for the town, we are supposed to seek help on our own if we need it from the New York State DEC. That's what was outlined in 1975. And most importantly, because again, starting with the Conservation Board a long time ago, we would meet with the ERB, which was a permitting board. We're just an advisory board. So I don't think we ever realized that we were supposed to connect more with you guys, the town board, and how we would interact or not, even with the presentation that was just done today or tonight, how would we work with you on that? So I guess we're kind of saying, how far do you want us to go, or where could we be the most useful? Because we would like some guidance as to what projects you might think are important for us to take a peek at, if you would like, one of us or many of us or whatever to attend some other boards, planning board, whatever. We're just open to what your thoughts are.
So I certainly don't think there's anything that you're meant to have been doing that you haven't been doing from that perspective. So let me just put you at ease in that regard. I think this board is really interested in hearing from our volunteer boards and committees and thinking about how can we support you in whatever agendas you have fashioned. So that's kind of what we wanted to be able to do tonight, is to talk through some of the things that I know you're working on. But I love that you started with asking us about what things we would like you to work on too, because that's great, and I love the ability to have that kind of a dialogue. One thing that, I'll speak first, and then, I think everybody probably has opinions too. One thing that I'm particularly interested in working with the Conservation Board on is around the concept of open space, and I know that you guys have worked together with the planning department to update the open space inventory. But one of the things that I would like to do is to go beyond the inventory, but really to start to think about how do we grow open space within the town.
Right.
And so, I know there was a conversation a couple of months back now, about the Button Hook property and how should the town play a role in potentially acquiring that property as an open space area. And we were sort of like, ooh, how would anybody do that? And so that kind of knowledge and understanding, setting aside that particular property, but that kind of knowledge and understanding about how do we identify appropriate open space opportunities, so beyond the current inventory, what opportunities exist out there, and how do we identify them, prioritize them, and then how do we sort of establish a plan whereby the town would be able to be in a position to do something to acquire those properties. I think that's kind of a long-term plan, a management plan that we can sort of work to over time. I think, in this particular instance, we're not there yet, we don't have the sort of infrastructure set up. But understanding how would we be able to do that in the future, how would the town be more proactive in terms of identifying and then seeking out and acquiring open space.
Well, with that said, I mean, what I find, still needing guidance about in a way is that you're the town board, you were elected, you have certain budgets, priorities, a plan. So what I'm trying to hopefully gain is a way of integrating with, we may have thoughts about something we might like to pursue, but we need a way of integrating practically with things that are on your agenda, looking at what the needs are of the town, that we don't have the same knowledge base, because there's so many working parts. For instance, talking about open space, I ran into Jill at the post office, and we were talking, and she raised a very interesting issue about in-rem properties, in terms of something we know nothing about, something that the town is addressing. Maybe in that way, we could integrate how we might look at that, how you might look at that, not just you, but the board. Again, in raising the Button Hook property. Obviously, there are considerations, especially after yesterday and today, with thinking about the financing of anything. So, there are challenges I think we respect. We would love to do everything as everyone would. But we're trying to be very practical and pragmatic at the same time, promote as much as we can the ideals of conservation, which is totally on everyone's mind, especially, children. I mean, we're hopefully creating a better planet. I mean, years ago, we stopped, basically, we changed garbage pickup to reduce carbon emissions. Barbara Gerard kind of did that. I mean, what are the things, how can we, again, I'm using the same word, but integrate our goals and your goals? That's what we'd like to do, I believe.
And we have been basing on a comprehensive plan,
Yes,
so a lot of our goals are interconnected.
yes.
That's actually fabulous, and that's actually something that I was gonna raise with you, and I think I had mentioned it to Karen, we had a really productive conversation right outside. It's the best. So the Rec Commission has come to us and they've asked us about a new master plan for the for recreation. And that was actually, again, another goal of the comprehensive plan, so following along the same lines. And one of the things that we noticed when we were going through the bullets that Sabrina had assembled for us was this, passive recreation, enhancing open space, and we're like, you know what? This is something that the conservation board, working with the rec commission, working with our planner, is something that you know, integrating it. You know, unfortunately, like the committees are all in silos, and we should start to integrate them and have them
Right,
work
yeah.
together. And that's, you know, all of a sudden, it's like the light bulbs are going off saying, oh my gosh, everything is conservation. So when we had the Minkle Dam discussion, it was like, oh my gosh, the conservation board is going to be here, how fabulous, because this is the sort of thing we really need them, you know, to weigh in on and just give us some guidance on, because again, all native plantings, how do we take and restore the area? You know,
Well, that's one of the things we were doing in natural resource inventory, and I know the town has started with that with Kellen. And again, we're trying to be as practical as we can, and you know, we're trying to see how can we get grants, but it's very difficult to get grants, so how can we best work with what we have to achieve the best possible outcome.
is it helpful to you if we provide you with a list of, you know, like the in-rem properties, and maybe that
Yes.
would, okay, that would be
That would
something
be
that
great.
some people could be working on.
Yes.
The other thing would be the rec master plan, so again,
Yeah,
maybe a
be
couple
great.
people could be working on that with
Actually, I
budgets.
have
Yes.
been connected with Kellen.
Oh, fabulous.
About, and we're basically gonna meet soon to kind of look at, in terms of the matrix development, around the NRI and looking at different, you know, ranking those properties, and I think.
Well, you're saying a lot of words that I'm not, the matrix, the NRI, yeah.
So basically, it aligns with
The
exactly
matrix,
what
the
you were
movie.
saying, I'll try to use it in Ivy words. So ID and prioritize, so they typically will call those in the context of NRI's matrix, looking at a matrix, like what are the points that you measure the property against to determine its value?
Yes, right.
Does it have wetlands, does it have woodlands?
Right.
So Kellen is looking at kind of very similar piece, but for public, you know, the public properties for the parks. And so we're gonna kind of look at what examples I've come up with and that we can base it on best practices and what is he coming up with and comparing and contrasting so that we start being able to link those and align that piece together.
And even something as simple as making sure you get the agendas of planning board,
Yes,
you
that
know,
would be great.
meetings or zoning boards, so that as something comes up, even if you're not affirmatively approached because it falls through the cracks, to make sure you're seeing it, so something's coming up and you say, oh, that might be something we need to make sure we're involved in.
Yeah, that would be great, I mean, just to, another perspective. Also, I don't know if maybe it would be something you have, I mean, do you, as a town, I mean, do you have any way of maybe finding out about grants that we may not know about? I mean, we were thinking about trying to get money for certain projects if that works. I don't know how that works with the town and how the town funds
Usually we try
things.
projects, so if you identify a project that you'd
Like
like
the
to do.
Minkle Dam, you got a grant, somebody got a grant.
So we got a grant for the feasibility study.
Right.
And
And
if
then
it
we
comes
have,
down,
excuse me?
and if it comes down, I know
Yes.
Hudson River
Yes.
Estuary prioritizes
Right.
shovel ready with respect to the restoring of fish passages
Oh,
and
okay, good.
where you're not in terms of that process, you then start losing priority in terms of the evaluation of the application and unlikely you're gonna get anything. That's just, they're shovel ready when it comes to restoring fish
Right, and I do know
passages.
that there were some grant opportunities available to us if, you know, the dam was literally like about to burst and life in limb was going to be
And
lost.
hard hat people invest were on site, right?
Yeah, so,
So a lot
yeah,
of
so
times you
we
can't get a
thankfully we
grant
applied.
until the project's been identified and the board's approved it and we're ready to go.
Okay.
So it may be that you have a project you wanna work on, we look at it, agree it's a great idea, and then you go seek grants
Okay.
for it.
Yeah, that's what, I mean, I think we tried to discuss that, so that's really obviously, because at the end of the day, yeah,
Yep.
you're the ones that are, we can only give you our ideas.
Dennis has been great at
Yeah.
starting to look at some opportunities.
Right.
Yeah, for-
And did you wanna quickly, anyone talk about a few things that, for Earth Day, what we were doing, or Earth Month, really?
Sure.
So we actually have the calendar, so Sue, would you like to go through the list of, it's not just a day, it is a month. For the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, it starts on the 1st of April, and the last event we have scheduled is on the 25th.
Great.
Oh, fabulous.
We have 12 events that are, 11 events that are confirmed, and
Wow.
2 that are tentative. And it involves many groups in the town. Aside from the Conservation Board, it's the Newcastle Healthy Yards, Pollinator Pathways,
Great.
Garden Club, the DAR, the library, I'm forgetting something, I mean, there's just some.
Sustainability.
Okay, yes, you're involved. And also, we have, we're working with, people who are outside of the town, but they're gonna be here helping us, we're having, we're having like bird walks in Glacier, hikes in Glacier, scavenger hunts at Prune Sanctuary. I mean, we have a lot of people involved. We're gonna have the Girl Scouts planting willow trees. We don't know the exact date yet, but at Glacier.
Yes.
They're actually, so we have to be
Yes.
very clear.
Lucille emailed
They're-
them.
okay.
All of the
10 inches.
yes. And actually, I do wanna say, from a discoverchappaqua.com standpoint, I only had the list from Lucille that was emailed out about a month ago, and so can I reach out to you, Sue, to get like an
Yes,
updated list?
yeah,
Because,
we have a lot more added,
okay,
and we're using many facilities, many parks in the area.
yep,
And the very first event on the 1st of April is gonna be at Chapac. And we're having Jessica Schuler, who's now one of the, she's the manager of plants, the native plants
Oh, very
or
cool.
something at Laston Arboretum.
Oh, wow.
So she's very well known. Yeah, and so we're gonna be opening that up to everyone and publicizing it, very heavily.
so I'm not sure if you folks have checked out Discover Chappaqua. We dropped a piece in February. It was like a love letter from Chappaqua talking about, things to do during the month of February, where to go for Valentine's Day, but we do things quarterly to kind of spotlight major events or major happenings in town. And so what we were thinking for April is a whole Earth Day, Earth celebration month. Not just talking about the events that you folks have put together, but also with the merchants, whatever is going on downtown, and just tying it all together. And then I was thinking of perhaps doing pieces of something like, instead of using paper towels, get dish towels at Breeze, or do things like, ways to swap, or actually replicating what Bear Burger did, 20 Ways to Love the Earth. Just something really great and fun and really community driven. So
This is in Discover Chappaqua?
yeah, discoverchappaqua.com.
So we could share that information with you?
Yes, and we'll
Yeah, actually,
circulate
why
that.
don't you, after this meeting, circulate that list to everybody, because I know Lisa's
it's-
thinking she wants to make sure the chat pack stuff is up, I'm gonna make sure it's in the newsletter, let's
Yeah, so it really should be on the Chapac, so Chapac has a website and it's got
Okay.
this
It'll be on
fabulous
upcoming events.
so we'd love to be able to, catch people who go to that website to be able to advertise it.
Well, we've been wrestling with how to communicate all of this information to all of the groups and people who aren't in groups, who live in the area. So we were trying to come up with a calendar system, which, Discover Chappaqua would be a good one. We
Yeah.
wanna put flyers in for all of the events we have here into the Friday newsletter, ahead of time. But we
The
wanted to have
electronic
some.
board.
electronic sign.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, the electronic board that can advertise all of these things.
Yeah, 12 words or less.
That's okay, on each slide, just on each slide, it's fine for each
I know,
event.
we can keep doing that,
Keep
yeah.
going.
And there'll be plants blooming, so hopefully it works.
That's right.
Yes.
Folks can do a triangle sign talking about Earth Month and then
Yes.
referring to a website, because when people walk by that sign, they see it.
And I think it's very I mean, it's been there forever.
Yeah,
It's nice.
yeah,
No,
and it's in
lovely.
Millwood too, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so do you wanna come up with some sort of just design graphic?
Well, Susan and I are kind of working on that. We're
Okay.
trying
Oh,
to
fabulous.
put together all of the ideas that we have.
Okay.
And Susan, you're the marketing person for this.
Writing everything up was
Yeah, so we're gonna have
making it appealing.
every event described in detail, with graphics so people can see where we're gonna be.
Right.
But so we have that, which we were gonna put on, it's a lot of information, that we'd have on the conservation board website.
Okay.
But we could, condense the information to go and discover Chappaqua. But we were trying to have like I guess for some of these events, we could just put it up on the electronic board. We were trying to put them somewhere on a town calendar, and we're finding that to be very.
You should also create events on Facebook for all of these.
Yeah.
I don't, does the conservation board even have its own page, or we can do it?
We've talked about having a Facebook page, so we may just have to take the.
Might be easier to just do it through the town's page, cause we already have, 1,500 followers or whatever, so.
And if you have an Earth month calendar and it's separate, if you gave us one calendar, we could put that on the town newsletter too and send out Earth month calendar separately.
Not only on the mile of them doing the calendar, haven't they? So we could give it to them, take it and incorporate it.
Just a follow-up question about using the town's Facebook page. So if we were gonna put this as an event on the town's Facebook page.
Just send it to me.
Who would the, so Ivy be the, so that's great. And the idea of the triangle sign sounded fantastic. Would that be something that the town could find funding for, or how
Yeah,
would we do that?
you guys have we have a boards and commission line that has some money in it for things exactly like this, for you to be able to, be okay.
We just need someone to design the graphic and to,
Yeah, so that we
get
can
it to print.
Boards and commission, there's a boards and commission budget line.
Oh, okay.
That collectively everybody shares a couple $1,000, so. But it's for these, these incidentals, so that you can put on projects and, we can help you with some financial support.
That's great.
So the Sustainability Advisory Board is working on a movie for Earth Day, so should we be linking in with them? Like we would normally advertise it on the electronic sign and at Chapac and
More the merrier.
like
I think it's both. I think you should still do all of those things, but just make sure it gets onto Sue's calendar too, so that it's in the master.
We're gonna try to confuse you if we can.
That's what I'm saying.
He's saying that the VAB is doing as well.
They've already been, they were also, yeah.
Get it to the difference.
But you,
They hand it off.
so you have the VAB with the cleanup day and included?
We had, it's the 27th.
Yeah.
That one was, that was a probable event, cause we didn't know about it, until I think Friday, we found out, so, okay.
Is that the one with lights?
Big.
No,
Well,
They do it
actually,
every
that's
year.
pick a park program.
Cause there's
Yeah,
like
no,
a
that's
park
different.
thing,
yeah,
it's
that's
different.
different,
That
Yeah,
would
they-
be
Yeah,
later.
cause I know we also have the other one, but.
Right.
Wait, so do you have the VAB's townwide cleanup day in your calendar? Is
Is
it
it
not?
27th, the last Saturday?
It is the 27th.
It is the
Okay,
27th.
got it, got it.
And is the Rotary doing the cake breakfast with it or not?
Right, but
they
the
speak-
timing, the Rotary one is the 20, I don't think it's on the 27th.
It must be the same day.
what is the
No, it's
Rotary
the
Club?
25th, the 25th is a Saturday, that's why.
Yeah,
that's
right, so it must be the 25th for cleanup day,
Yeah.
cause they do it on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's okay.
Great, so is the pickup park for Westchester County, is someone,
Yeah, so tell us about Pick a Park, what's
is
that?
that, Westchester County is doing their thing and they're looking for the,
Right, so the pickup park, my understanding was that Dennis received an email from George Latimer.
Forwarded to me, yes.
It was a board email,
Right.
and it was to encourage an event within each town to choose a park, or I assume more than one, to target for a cleanup effort. And so we expanded the idea with the removal of invasive plants, the idea of plant pollution. It's not just the plastic litter, it's actually the parks need more care than just removing the material that should have been taken to a trash receptacle. And so we talked amongst ourselves about picking a park, and probably it will be Getney, to go out and to instead of the orange bags of the town cleanup, we'll be using the brown bags from our town for the recycling, and to target, won't be able to do the whole park, but the area that's probably closest to the new perennial planting and the area by the playground, to work on that.
Great. very exciting. And what date are you charging for that?
So that remains to be determined on availability. And we also have an invasive removal program that is Vine Squad that is in the process of being worked on. We have an Epic ambassador who is taking that on temporarily, and grateful for the work that he's done so far. So we're still trying to organize and to get that together, but we have vests, reflective vests that we will be wearing, and distributing the photos when we're able to get it together. And sometime in the month of April, we're going to try to get together to be able to start that.
And is that a public event? So can I come and wear my gardening gloves?
So
Get all
absolutely,
purchased for the
the more people, the more welcome. Exactly, we have a limited number of us to start with, but we certainly have an unlimited amount of work to do. So we'll definitely share the date with that, and love to see everybody there as well.
It's a really nice partnership too with the Vine Squad. I mean, he came in and did an amazing presentation with us. And he's like totally motivated and amazing, and so it's nice, we're kind of at the point where we're really developing nice alliances with other groups.
It's great.
But I'm not
great.
averse
Those
to
pines
also
are
picking
everywhere.
up garbage if I see it.
Oh, we'll pick it up too. Yes, we will.
I'm willing
We'll
to do
bring
that
rope
as well.
bags.
Thank
Doesn't
you.
have to all be organic.
Spread the word, Dennis. Anything else you guys, I
So
would
just
love
one
to.
last question, the survey then, because the person from Westchester
Yes.
had been in touch with me about getting that survey done, so I hope that would be done.
Okay, yeah, I'll take care of that.
Yeah, so we need to, we need to give the date for the pick-a-park.
Yes.
But although, maybe not, so I think what the county's trying to do is to create a county-wide list of events. So if pick-a-park is really a Newcastle, you know, and maybe not open to the broader public, we may not want to publicize that. So we should think about that.
Okay.
I believe, the gist of what I read in the email was that they wanted to create sort of a county-wide calendar of Earth Day
I think they
related
just
events.
wanted to show that all
Everybody
of these
was
towns
participating.
are participating
Yeah.
in the 50th anniversary of Earth Day
Right.
by doing these events at different parks. Now, our town already does a cleanup day
Right.
in April, that can be included in the survey.
That should be included. Right.
And then you could say also you're doing this pick a park and
Yeah, we don't wanna overlap, but then we figured it would be better to, right, move to that
Yeah,
direction.
we just need to respond.
Sure.
I got you.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
so I would just
Working
say
on it.
at some point, you know, in the future, we'd love to meet with you guys again and see, you know, how we progressed and what, you know, if that fits into your calendar at some point.
So can I just make like a last like little request? So one of the things that Ivy spoke about was, you know, open space and priorities, and, you know, hopefully in the future being in a position to be able to actually, you know, purchase these parcels or to pay for them. I'd be really curious what other communities do and how they do it and how they have found their methods, whether or not they work or they don't work. As long as, you know, if you guys are up to it, that would be really important for us to know.
The actual funding piece.
Yeah, like how do other communities fund it and do they find it works? Is it a good thing, a bad thing,
I know that Bedford, I believe, did a bond at some point to purchase, so we started on, you know, we have some data, but we could do a more comprehensive.
I think they had like a tax, they
Yeah.
literally have a line on their tax bill.
Right, and that's actually what I meant, so
Yeah.
I said bond, but I meant that they.
Yeah, so I'd just be interested to see how that works, how they
Yeah.
got that.
If you want, we could talk later. I went to the Eco Opportunities
Oh,
Forum last
perfect.
week in Kingston. DEC was there, Scenic Hudson put it together.
Ah.
And it was more Hudson River biased, but you know, one town's fortunate enough to have a mayor who's also a CPA. I maybe understood 30% of what he responded to me. When I asked that same question, I was the only one who stood up to ask that question. Where do the matching funds come from? I'm the committee
Right,
of civil service.
exactly.
Maybe I'm asking a question everybody should know the answer. And I got three very different answers from three, you know, Hudson River waterfront communities that are located
I would just be really
points north of
curious
us.
how other people have actually
Yep.
put it
Well,
into action.
Just quickly, one thing I would say, but I mean, I've been here a long time, I know years, you know, many years ago, I mean, there was a lot of community interest in things like this, various citizens left parcels of land.
Right.
Or funds such as the glacier, so I don't know if there's a way of reaching out to, you know, people in the town, if anyone can think of what, it's kind of like your college
Like
saying.
include us in your estate plans.
Mark Zuckerberg
I
went
don't
to my
really
high
wanna
school.
say this. There you go.
We're done.
You're done.
Yeah, but to keep it on people's mind, I think that the more the conservation board does, the more that we are advertising, we let people know what we're doing to raise awareness. I think there's been an ebb and flow, and there hasn't been much in many towns since kind of that initial push in the 70s and in the early 80s. So just raising the awareness about that, that's an option for them.
And we have been trying, Westchester Land Trust came in and spoke with us, so they're really a nice ally, I'm learning. The DEC came in to talk to us about NRIs, so we really have been kind of learning and building that network too, which is a helpful resource as well, so.
Really, thank you for meeting with us.
And the last thing I just wanna say is thank you so much for all the work that you've done in Glacier and led there. It's my favorite place in town, so I'm a
Can I just
huge fan.
quickly, in case you don't know, Susan is actually applying for the open position that there is now on the conservation board, so this was A, she's been great, and B, just an opportunity for her to
Trying to jump in.
meet you guys and gals, so yes, that's right. Okay, just wanted to make sure
Thanks
that
for coming.
connection was
Thank
made.
you.
Right.
All the meetings are like this. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry. Thank you. I didn't mean to go ahead of the plastic packaging.
No, actually, you were first, yeah.
Not much at all.
Sure. It is water.
Yes. Is that better or worse?
Oh, I have a recommendation.
Okay, so let's do the plastic bags so that we can
Yes, please.
let Jen.
Sorry, Jen.
That's right.
My best guess of like an hour off from
You're an
when it
hour
goes
off,
to
that's
the-
right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did offer to text you.
Alright, so just to bring a little background, Newcastle has for 3 years had its reusable bag law, which banned plastic bags and had a 10-cent charge on paper bags at certain stores. That's been in place for over 3 years now. Beginning March 1, New York State's plastic bag ban goes into effect. So for us, it hardly affects us with the plastic bags since we already have the ban. There's a little wrinkle where we have to follow New York State law. So restaurants and I guess it's really just restaurants.
It's just restaurants.
Can use plastic bags for takeout, which we could not. Yeah. So, our law still stays in effect with the 10-cent fee until Westchester County adopts a 5-cent fee. And I have heard that they may adopt it about June. So if theirs goes into effect, I mean, it hasn't been adopted yet, so we don't really know what will happen.
There's an article in the Examiner today, actually, that the county is starting to look at.
Hadn't they said when they're?
No.
They need to do it, but.
Okay, so they're talking about doing it, it
Yeah.
isn't in place yet.
Yeah.
When it goes in effect, we have 1 year that we get to keep our law in place.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's nice.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And then we have to follow Westchester County. So our 10-cent fee stays in place for a year from the time that Westchester County adopts their, I think actually when their law is effective, we then have a year, and then our stores have to charge 5 cents. Well,
Or whatever
whatever they want to charge,
Right.
but at least 5 cents. And
Oh, does Westchester have the option of doing 10 cents?
no,
So five-
No,
so
no, no.
5 is the maximum?
Yes.
And is
The
it prescribed?
county-
Yeah, go. I'm interrupting.
the Westchester County does the 5 cents. A store could decide, as I understand it, to keep the 10-cent fee and keep 5 cents for itself.
What?
But we can't legally.
Can't manage
No,
it.
no, we can't do it as a
And so
law.
if the county does the 5 cents, the state has prescribed how that 5 cents.
Right, so right now, the 10
Gotcha.
cent fee that the stores charge, they get to keep the 10
Here in
cents
Newcastle,
in
right?
Newcastle.
Yeah.
Once Westchester County's 5 cent fee goes in, that 5 cents goes, several cents to the county and several cents to the state.
3 and 2, I think.
3, yeah.
Yeah.
So the stores don't get anything.
You know,
But the county's supposed to use that money to provide reusable bags.
right, in theory, it's meant to come back to the town in the form of reusable bags that we can hand out to people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So can we apply, Nick, to either the state probably, to, much like we do home rule, where we can say, hey, we were charging more, which is
No, we tried that.
arguably better?
Could you try it? You could, I think it would be unsuccessful because this issue of the bag fee and the fact that other laws have been enacted before then was debated when the legislation was adopted last year. And it was decided that the laws that were adopted could be grandfathered until the county adopted its own law and then the town laws go away. So I think that would be an unsuccessful effort given the prior
Did you go to
discussion.
Albany or you just wrote letters? I mean, you were, yeah, you were
Yeah,
very
we wrote
involved in
letters
the.
to try to say, could we just keep the law we have, and,
Yeah.
it did not make it into the New York State law, so.
I remember, we were on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We lobbied to try to get that in the bill.
So,
So this local law that Keenan Bean has
Mhm.
drafted for us,
It goes through and it changes the definitions to
Yeah.
be compliant with the New York State law.
okay,
It removes the ban on plastic bans from the town law because you're preempted now by New York State's ban.
Yeah.
It then provides language, and we have a new version that we provided, and Jennifer,
Right,
thank you for your comments,
I
they were very helpful. We provide language regarding exemption to carry out bag cost pass-through, so if there is a charge for the carry-out bags, there are certain provisions, examples where they cannot be passed through to the customer. Using the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program and a couple of other programs. So that's the real intent of the law, is to now that New York State has caught up to the town of Newcastle, is to make our law
They
consistent
haven't.
with the states. Well, true. They've tried.
Well, I sort of wonder from that perspective, I mean, is there any reason for us to advocate with the county that they not adopt the 5 cent law?
No.
Oh, no, because towns that haven't done it can't do it now,
Right.
right, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
And so the process would be to hold a public hearing and then adopt the local law.
right.
But
It
in
would
many
be-
respects, it would only be good until Westchester County adopts its law.
right, and Westchester County can only do 5 cents.
Right.
Based on New York State law.
Right.
They can only do 5 cents. So selfishly, it'd be good for us to advocate to be able to keep our own law, but it
But
really.
environmentally, it's not.
Environmentally, we want all the towns to have the 5 cent fee, because the whole point is to get people to use reusable bags and not pay for the
Consistently.
paper bags at all,
So instead, we should outreach to the county and encourage them to pass
Which
the
I
5
have
cent.
and
Of course.
yeah. And it looks like it's happening, it's just a matter of time.
Okay. But we wait for Westchester County to enact their law, then to pass our law, or do we do this
No,
every
we
other
do
year?
No, we can go ahead and
Okay,
do your,
got it.
and do your law now.
This, the law that you're adopting now, or I think they have to have a public
Yeah, they
hearing?
have to have a public
You have to have
hearing.
a public hearing for it,
Okay.
but really the law is just making
Consistent
Newcastle's
with the
law
state.
consistent with the state. So it's not really
Not the
changing
county.
anything.
Right,
No.
Yeah.
We just have to
Yeah.
accept that whole restaurant bag
Yeah.
exemption,
Yeah.
which is kind of a bummer.
Right.
Which you won't see that language in Newcastle's law.
Right.
Because it's New York State law that's driving that.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, why don't we do that, we'll set a public hearing, this is a little thing for March 24. Is that enough time, Christina, with the publication and everything?
Yeah. Definitely.
Alright, great.
First report?
Yeah. Alright.
Do we have any input to lobby the county on how they use the 5 cents?
It's mandated by state law.
That they can only, I mean, not where it goes, but like whether or not the county chooses to use their 5 cents to like send non-biodegradable plastic reusable bags all over the county. You see what I mean? Like, people that reuse bags because they don't have one, they have 50 of them in their garage. They just like use the ones that they have, so like putting more bags into the county system. If we're trying to make an
Also might be-
environmentally friendly choice, I'm not actually sure that that's it.
I mean, that might be
Right.
Chappaqua, but it may not be other communities, people may not be using or have in their garage all those bags,
They
so.
have, but they have a Target bag, they have bags.
Yeah.
And I think it's 3 cents to the state and 2
I think
cents
it's
to
3
the
cents to the
county.
state,
Bags
2
I
cents
saw
to the
today.
county.
Right, so it's gonna
And there's a focus on that, the reusable bags will be geared towards,
low and fixed income communities, that's
yes,
maybe
yeah,
the
not,
statute as well.
not to us.
Okay.
Alright.
So the date would be March 24th?
Yeah, we'll set it at the public hearing, we'll set it at the town board meeting that follows this, okay? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
you wanna jump back up to the facade improvement grant program? Thank you, Jennifer, I'm sorry about the time. Facade improvement grant?
So, we have
Some
the
changes.
facade improvement grant. We made a couple of changes to the program proposal that we reviewed in the last meeting. The first was to more specifically call out the 2 phases of the program, so the phase 1, which is the 50% matching grant for an amount of $1,000, and phase 2, which would be a matching grant that would be up to a maximum grant amount of $7,500. And then we tried to be more clear about the funding for the program and the term of the program as well. So looking at making the funding, which is a maximum of $150,000 across both phases, and that the program would terminate 3 years after the date of adoption of the program, and that we would have mandatory sort of checkpoints on an annual basis as well as between phase 1 and phase 2, at which time the town board would review data on the success of the program and make changes and adjustments as necessary. So that's what we have before us today.
So based upon something that Lisa has said in the past about worrying a bit about if there's a transfer of ownership of an existing building and whether or not a new or am I stating this
That's
incorrectly?
not really it, but
Okay,
go ahead,
well,
say
no,
what you wanna
why
say.
don't you say, why don't you give me,
Well, my concern is I have no problem with phase 1. I like phase 1. I think it gets to what we want it to get to, where people can improve their facades here. I like that. I have a problem with phase 2, and I think that if it's something that the town board really wants to do, there should be an affirmative approval of phase 2 after phase 1 happens to see if it's successful first. Second, my concern is that phase 2, if we're matching 50%, $7,500, that's a $15,000 expenditure, essentially, that any developer can come in, purchase a property, now they are, or current owners, and expand their property to new zoning or build something entirely new, and now they're essentially, the town is basically giving them $7,500, which is a $15,000 project, to do new windows or new whatever it may be that they should really be footing 100% of the bill for to begin with. So it just inherently bothers me, phase 2.
So I think the idea is that we have the opportunity to review the applications on a case-by-case basis, and that they would need to meet one of the sort of eligible work criteria that we've outlined here. And that we would be able to review and say that this is not compliant with the goals of this program.
I think it's just gonna be too arbitrary. It's gonna be very hard to say, you get it, but you don't. And I just think it's gonna end up being issues and potential lawsuits or whatever it may be. I know it's not that much money, but there's something about it that bothers me, and I think it's not, I understand the purpose and I just think it's not gonna be used for its intended purpose, which is really to enhance the facades and to help our property owners who went through a big construction project to really enhance and beautify the town. I just am worried that phase 2 is not getting them there.
And
I would even be more amenable to just having phase 1 and increasing it to $1,500 or something like that.
So I do think that we want to make the commitment to property owners and merchants in town that there are larger dollar grants coming. Because the kind of facelifts and facade improvements that we've described here are things that exceed $1,000. You know, to be able to do. That exceed $2,000, so the grant plus the 50%, thank you. You know, so I think we wanna make the promise that that's coming, and I think that there's also the intention that phase 2 will help existing property owners come into compliance with some of the design guidelines and recommendations that are described in the form-based code. And so that's actually a recommendation that came out of the res group and the analysis that they did related to the form-based code, which is that communities have implemented programs such as this to help those property owners who have no intention of developing or building new on their site to have the kind of overall facelift and improvement to the town that we're hoping
I
to
don't
generate.
have a problem with that, but I think phase 2 is getting to more work that could potentially be new construction. Replacing windows, replacing doors, I don't think it's meant, I think that can be used for much broader than what we're intending it to be used for.
So I think there are two pieces of this. One is worry about a developer coming in, purchasing property and doing something with it. Right? Could we say that
But
as
there are
of the
current
adoption?
owners who are developers too.
Sure.
Just to be clear, it does not apply to any brand new construction coming in, so if you tear a building down and build up, it wouldn't be
That's what
applicable.
I'm saying.
Right, but
it's-
if you take your current building and do work to it, I think it would apply.
It would.
But
Yeah.
don't we want it to?
Yeah, right, we can.
Not if they decide to build another 3 floors,
wait, so-
and why are we paying for that?
Sure, so right even in the form-based code, it talks about if there's a guideline, if something is, I forget the exact wording, is changed more than 50% or something along those lines, you know, it's a different, right? We can do something like that where if there's an initiative going on already on that property that is going to take up more than 50% of the building,
That's a great point.
then we don't allow it.
Right.
I think for me, my challenge with it, with $150,000, it's earmarking money and putting it on hold for 3 years, and it just sounds risky to me, especially where I don't even know what does $7,500 buy. Like I would love to chat.
2,000.
Or whatever it is, I'm just saying, I would love, I apologize because I didn't have like time to do any due diligence and chat with the folks who, you know, who own buildings in town or the merchants and I would have loved to get their perspective on it. But like $150,000 to me is a lot of money, especially when you've got like a community center that has a roof that's about to, you know, like that could go towards the community center. Like they're the trade-offs with this money, and that's what kind of scares me about it. And that's why like I hear what Lisa's saying is seeing how phase 1 goes, seeing how successful it is, seeing how people respond to it, that gives us more insight as to
Right.
how successful it can be.
I just think, you know, $150,000 is a lot of money. The town has also just invested $15+ million in terms of our infrastructure and streetscape, $75,000 of which was the furniture we purchased for the new streetscape. So, you know, when you compare those kinds of numbers, I think that making this kind of investment in the sort of look of our downtown that will, you know, directly be able to assist merchants and provide them with direct and property owners with direct financial assistance, which is something that they've been sort of clamoring for, I think is a reasonable expenditure.
I mean, in addition, so under 50,000, this is really talking about over let's say it's spread out, it winds up being evenly dispersed over the 3 years. And so you're talking about $50,000 per year, right? So it's not, yes, we are earmarking.
It doesn't say that.
Well, this is going to be in place for 3 years, correct?
Right, but
Right, so whenever it happens, so, correct, we do not know exactly when somebody may take us up on this particular offer. It's also very possible that people look at the $1,000 grant, and I don't think we should use that as a barometer of success if there are fewer than we had expected building owners who take us up on phase one. Because just because they don't take us up on phase one doesn't mean that phase two would not be successful.
no, I agree, but I would rather see phase one increased a little bit, cause $1,000, $2,000 essentially doesn't do much. It does do some, it'll replace an awning, it'll do certain things. But I'd rather see that maybe increase to $1,500 than it's $3,000 of work, and hold off on phase two until, we're holding off until after the form-based code anyway, so I'd rather say there's a possibility of doing phase two and the board will affirmatively approve that at such time after we've reviewed phase one and after the zoning.
If this were to be approved, and at some point in time when the form-based code is, if and when the form-based code gets approved, we can go and decide, you know what, we're gonna stop phase two, and we can decide to stop it at a later date.
Why can't we decide to start it?
Because, going back to Ivy's point, she's trying to show a commitment to the
But I think
building
phase
owners.
one shows that commitment.
I don't think phase one alone shows that commitment. But I hear your point, I get your point.
I do.
I think phase two shows that we are serious about making sure that our downtown looks and feels a certain way based upon the code that we will.
I don't know, I also think it's a lot of money and we still haven't had the discussion about what we're using that money for, that we've used up half of it, and it's the same comment we made last time, it's not changed.
The majority of that money has been spent on the chap line, I don't know if you have a chance.
I've looked at it, of course I have, and but I think that, and it's been, we used it for the, we used it for the basketball court, and we used it for some other things, and consultants, and I know what we've used it for, but we've already gone through half of it, and I think I just wanna talk about, this is a big chunk of the rest of the half, it's a quarter of the remaining money. I just wanna make sure it's the right thing we're using it for, and we still haven't had a discussion about it.
So what are you
I've seen
proposing
a
to use the money
spreadsheet.
for instead?
I don't know, I wanna sit down and talk about all the options that are available to us and what we think, and sit down and put what our options and our priorities are. All of us.
But we
What
do
forum do you-
have
what
goals and
forum?
objectives that the town board just established for ourselves, and this was one of the things that we established as a goal for this town
Well,
board.
not a facade grant
Yeah,
program.
that was one of the specific goals and objectives that
I did
that we
not
proposed.
call that, we called enhancing the downtown is
No,
different.
it's actually specifically one of the line items in our goals and objectives. So, I think we can and should have that conversation, but again, I think spending $150,000 over the course of 3 years to directly provide financial assistance to the merchants and property owners who have been adversely impacted by 3+ years of construction, where they have been crying out for the town to give them some sort of assistance, to be able to provide them with that kind of assistance, and to understand the economic development impact that has the potential to have for a town is something that is in my mind, a good win and an effective use of $150,000.
May I?
I'm an advocate for our merchants more than anybody on prior town boards, and
Well, no,
I
that's not fair.
prior town boards, but I just worry, and I'm all for helping out. We're doing Discover Chappaqua. I have no problem with phase one. I just think that phase two is gonna be money that we're gonna just lose, and we're not gonna see much of an incremental benefit from it. And I think that the possibility of first having arbitrary, approvals is a big possibility. and it being utilized for things we don't necessarily want it utilized for, that are actually not gonna enhance the look of the downtown, let me finish, are possible, and I'm not saying no, I'm just saying let's wait and see and approve phase one now, which is a show of support, and I would be in favor of increasing the dollar amount for phase one and waiting on phase two. We're waiting anyway until after the form-based code is done, and let's just see how phase one goes and if people are even utilizing it.
And I think we've done that. I mean, we have the ability to approve applications on a case-by-case basis, and we have a gate point between phase one and phase two, where we will have the opportunity to make changes to the program if need be, or as Jason says, to cancel it entirely if it's not meeting our objectives.
I mean, it's always been my understanding, legal counsel tell me differently, that case-by-case basis is not such a great idea. That there has to be a specific, qualifications and reasons, and you apply, you get approved. It's not a case-by-case basis, you meet the requirements, that's it.
Well, we have standards in here that we've reviewed, and I think those standards are.
Right, but you meet the standards, but the standards are very broad. And I think pretty much anybody could qualify for that. Aside from ripping down a building and building a brand new building, other than that, you're pretty much qualifying. So I think you can't say, okay, we like what you're doing, you get it, but we don't like that so much, you're not getting it. I don't think you can do it.
Well, we could add more to the ineligible projects list, right? Like, if you're
could.
gonna
Or you
make
could
more.
strengthen the requirements if there are specific things
Sure.
that you're trying to avoid.
Right, but
What you're saying is reasonable. Why not add it to either the ineligible project list or be more explicit on what's the criteria for approval? I think we can do that. I think we can do what you're looking for.
Okay.
Did you want
I, if I may, wanted to add my perspective from the chamber. I think it's important that the merchants and the owners clearly understand what those standards are. That I think the larger sum is what's really important here, not the smaller ones. And when a building owner is getting, $7,500 of a $15,000 project, these are not major projects. I mean, adding a floor to your building, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're talking about improving. The only reason a building owner will do this is to make it better for their retailer, so that they could charge more money for their retailer. And the only reason the retailer will pay more money is if they have more traffic. So there's an economic incentive to make sure the project makes sense for them. You're not, I assume you're not gonna allow this to fix a bathroom, but I haven't gone through the code, whatever, but as long as it's specific, they understand it. I think economically it will happen that the projects they pick will be ones that will generally fit in what we want to add for economic development.
See, but you just made my point. I don't wanna be subsidizing someone, even if it's not a huge amount, to be adding a floor onto their building so they can charge. Okay, can I finish? Seriously, stop interrupting me. My point is, somebody's gonna add a floor, now they can replace windows which are in your list, they can do other things that then I don't need to subsidize them as a town, so they can now charge their retail tenant more money.
But adding a floor is hundreds of thousands of dollars and
Right,
years
and now
of
we're
permitting.
giving them money that they don't have to otherwise spend for enhancing their own building.
They're using this money because of the way that project would have to do. You're only gonna use this for some short-term project. You're not gonna ask for a grant of $7,500 for $150, $250, $300 project that's gonna take 2 years.
You might, because then it's just money you don't have to spend. You're gonna give me $7,500 so I can put in enhance my house? Sure, I'll do it and add it on to my $200,000 renovation. That's $7,500 I don't have to spend now.
So let's take your scenario, Lisa. I don't think that will ever happen because of the way the numbers work out. So let's say someone adds to their building. It's adding to the economic value of our downtown one way or another. That's the whole point.
It's not, it's adding, yes, but it's adding to the value of the property for that particular property owner, not necessarily to enhance the downtown so more people are coming to shop and make our downtown more vibrant. It is enhancing the economic value. If I wanna now sell my building, I can get more money for it, but it's not, the point of this is to help really are property owners so that we are, and the point with the $150,000 and the $1.5 million from Summit Greenfield, if we wanna say it was to enhance our downtown, making a building more valuable for an owner so they can then sell it and get more money and personally enrich themselves is not the same as enhancing the downtown to bring more people to downtown, to bring more shopping, to bring more vibrancy. That is different.
I understand that, but understand the value of a building is only based on the income you receive from that building. If that building doesn't get more income, vis-a-vis more traffic, more rent, more value, more
rent,
economic.
the building owner is not
You
getting
can't just
money
charge
from
rent if that's not
residents who are shopping.
But the point is, it's economic value of a building is economic value based on income. So if the building owner is doing something to enhance that building to get more income, because that only way you get more income is more traffic. It doesn't.
I understand,
So I don't
but I think the
your
money is
economic argument
supposed to be
works.
spent to bring back the vibrancy to our downtown, not to enhance. I can't, as a town, decide I'm gonna give you $7,500 so that when you sell your house, you will make more money, which will then bring up property values in Newcastle. I couldn't do that as a town
I
board
agree.
member in my fiduciary capacity. So you're sort of, I'm worried. Look, if I'm a retail store is using it to enhance their awning, no problem. They want to improve the facade or a little bit, no problem. But if I'm now enhancing somebody's private gain to sell their building, that I'm not comfortable with, and that's what I'm worried this is going to be utilized
That's just not the
for.
way the economics work, because it's all about income and value.
No, but the point is to enhance the vibrancy in the downtown for all of our residents, not to enhance the property value of a building for one owner of a building.
I understand that, but what I'm saying.
That's why I'm worried
But it's
that
both.
phase two is
Right, you
not
can't have
getting
one without the other.
Yeah.
One
I
begets
think
the other.
honestly, it's more,
You can't compare it to an
I think it's
individual house.
supposed to be utilized by a building owner to enhance maybe the exterior facade, to put awnings. I have no problem with that, to beautify the downtown. My problem is I'm worried I'm worried that this is a not insignificant amount of money that we're spending that people could use to add on to subsidize a larger project that they would otherwise do.
Great
That's
point.
what I'm concerned about, that's what bothers me.
Okay.
The concept of beautifying our downtown and helping our merchants, I'm on board with that concept. I'm worried that it's just not written correctly and it somehow bothers me.
Great,
So
so
let's
you
work
wanna
on
make
the
sure,
language,
that it's not part of a larger project, right? And that's the concern.
So I have a question, because if you, let's use the Compass, the building that was Compass
Right.
Real Estate as an example, right, where they actually made a large capital investment in the building and improved the facade in a pretty dramatic way, I might argue.
Looks great,
Would they not be, you say that they would not be eligible to apply this grant to that significant facade improvement, and that you'd rather that money just went to a superficial decorative improvement?
Yeah.
But
Whereas I
doesn't
think
the
that
bigger
kind of
project
an
have a bigger
investment in our
impact?
town brings in,
Should
it
be
begets,
encouraging
you know,
that
all of the
investment.
research on this is that, you know, you make one kind of an improvement, it compels others to make improvements, and improves the overall look of the block, making it more valuable for the property owner, and also in helping the merchants by bringing more traffic downtown, more people to shop. And so there have been numerous studies that have been done that show that over time. So I think Lori's example is a perfect example.
Well,
I would love to see
you know what?
this program used for those kinds of
Okay,
purposes.
so the front of Dory's, where that is now,
Yeah.
enhancing the steps, I think this could be utilized for that. Adding another floor to the building
No,
that's
it's not used
residential,
for
But
that.
that's not one of the things, it's new signage, exterior lighting,
windows.
painting, facade repair or reconstruction, cleaning the brick masonry or facade, new cornices or roof gables, new awnings or canopies, window or door replacement, not new ones, replacement, rear entrance improvements if open for use by the general public. That's it.
Okay, so in that situation, what they did to that building would not be covered. However, they,
Sure it would,
the-
they did a lot of those things.
it's not, I'm talking about
new
the,
cornices
what
for
they,
the roof gables, that's a,
they did the.
Okay, so then you're taking, they built another floor on that, that's not retail, nobody's going in there. And to me, I'm just worried that somebody's gonna use this to subsidize a larger project. Because I don't need to now spend the money that I would spend up there, I'm gonna take the money I would spend there and use it down here with subsidy from the town.
I mean, in my view, it's not a huge subsidy from the town, it's an incentive
But to
for-
Lauren's point, it's $150,000.
It's an incentive for the property owners and for the merchants to make improvements that will improve the look of our downtown and spur economic development.
I said my piece, if you're gonna approve it, you're gonna approve it anyway, but I just don't love the way it's written, and I said this a couple weeks in a row, and I just,
Okay,
it is
and
what
if
it
you
is.
have specific comments about things that you wanna change, you know, to Jason's point, if there's language that we wanna build in here about a dollar threshold for the projects themselves, the overall threshold for the project can't exceed $100,000 or, you know, whatever, if we wanna build that kind of language in, if you have specific comments on
I
the
can give
changes that
specific,
you-
this is the first
Well,
time I'm
I-
hearing that anybody's even open to that, so
Well, I
I
asked you
will
last week if
give
you had
that.
any specific comments
I
on this,
know
or
I
you
sent
didn't
it
send
to,
them.
I did send it, but
Today at 2.
clearly, no, I sent it on Friday afternoon.
You sent it to Ivy or to everyone?
To Ivy, cause she's the one who sent me the email in the first place. So I just responded. I will give that to you, but that's what, I don't have a problem with the concept, I have a problem that I just think the way it's utilized, and maybe it's cause I'm a lawyer and I like to plan for the way people are gonna twist everything, but it just troubles me.
Waiting for Lisa's comments.
And to say that we're gonna arbitrarily approve people, I know you can't do that
It's
in
not
a
that we're
fiscal
arbitrarily
responsibility.
approving people, it's that we're able to approve people on a case-by-case basis as to whether or
Right,
not
but
they meet the requirements in the program description. So if there are requirements that you wanna build in, I mean, we've had this in work session, this is now the second
Mhm.
time we've done this in work session, so if there are things that you wanna build
Okay.
into this,
I
please
will-
give us that feedback.
Okay.
Because what we would like to do is we'd like to have a program that everybody here can stand behind and feel good about.
Okay.
And it doesn't do us any good to ram things through and to push
Okay.
forward on a partisan basis. You know, we want you to be involved and we want to get your feedback on this, so
Okay, by the
please
way,
give it
I
to
am
us.
the same partisan that you are, just so you know. I'm also a Democrat, but that's fine, I will give you comments on that. And I also wanna know when we're gonna sit down and talk as a group about everybody's priorities for the extra money for the 1.5 million. I want a commitment when we're gonna sit down and actually talk about it, the whole board.
We're here right now, let's talk.
Well, Jeremy's not here, so I would like him to be here, but I mean, I've been saying this for like a year, that we need to sit down, and I know you haven't, that we need to sit down and talk about it.
We've had several conversations this year about our goals and objectives for this year. And if there are things that you wanted to add to that list, it would have been great to get those
That's
during the
very
2 work
different.
sessions
Don't we-
at which we
no,
talked
that's very
about
different.
what the town board's goals would be for the year.
Okay, that's very different, we had goals and objectives, which we did talk about, that's very different from what are we using the rest of the 1.5 million for.
So I don't
We have
remember
very
us ever
lofty
having a
goals.
sit-down conversation about that in the past.
No,
I
we
don't think
didn't.
we ever sat down
We-
and said,
that's my
this is how I
point.
think we should use this money strategically.
We haven't,
And
that's my point, and I've been saying for well over a year, and not just you, you weren't sitting in this seat.
And I don't remember when you were deputy supervisor, you calling for that conversation, Lisa.
I did it for
So,
a
to the extent
year.
that you're trying to hold up programs that I think are going to have a tremendous impact on our downtown, so that we can have a conversation that frankly should have happened before I even joined the town board, at the time the $1.5 million was gifted to the town, I have a little bit of a problem with that.
Okay, that is not fair, I'm not trying to hold things up, I'm trying to be fiscally responsible and sit down and figure out where we should best use the money. And I don't see why it's such an issue to have a conversation at the town board level, and why you're making me into the bad guy for wanting to discuss where we're gonna be spending $600,000.
I'm happy to discuss it right now. You've got a
So I
spreadsheet in
want
front of you.
Jeremy here, and I wanna schedule a time on a work session, on an agenda for when we're gonna discuss it.
Next meeting.
Sure.
February,
Perfect.
March 3rd.
Perfect. Perfect.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay, and I put the agenda together. If we can have, maybe people wanna put priorities together, so we have a starting point of the conversation, the priority list?
Well, I have a
Well,
priority
we have
list,
the
it's the
we have
goals and
list.
objectives that we
Right,
passed
so
for the
so a question
town
becomes,
board.
are there things in the list of goals and objectives that we should think about applying this money to?
That's the question.
Sure, well, we've now got a list, it's got, you know,
So
several dozen items on it, let's go.
so for next meeting, we will put the
And
goals
we
and
don't have enough
objectives.
money in that, what's left in the 1.5 to fund everything on that goals and objectives.
Of course not.
So
Well, some of the
that's
things-
why I'm
some of
saying
the
we
things
need
are
to sit down
budgeted.
and talk about,
Right,
some of the things are budgeted.
And some of the things, maybe a capital project next year that we now need to figure out how to fund, so it's not completely coming out of nowhere.
Okay.
Okay, do we get ready
So
to
so,
see-
I know,
No.
going back, so last week, so I think that if there are things that we want to, you know, use, like, you know, there's nothing in here that necessarily says that on a particular parcel, you can't apply for multiple of these grants. I didn't notice that, we should probably put something in this, right? This is along the lines of, you know, what you're I think we should think hard and be able to talk about this, you know, in short order, right? Right, this has been, I know Ivy's had this on the, this has been something that Ivy's been interested in for quite some time. We've talked about it several times as as the new town board this year. Let's get them in there so that we can move this forward.
Would you limit it to each owner or property?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I said property,
Is it
but
doable,
I'm like
is it
back and
doable,
forth
is it
on that.
possible to do by?
Yeah, what if a retailer wants money and the
Yeah.
building owner wants money?
Yeah.
Different interests.
So who would be the
Parcel?
applicant? So who's the applicant? Is it the, well, it would be the property owner.
Yeah.
So, okay, so it's gonna be the property owner.
Could be the
No, but the
developer.
property owner
yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily do an awning.
An awning could be a
It's-
merchant.
It's eligible to owners and tenants of retail,
Yeah.
right?
Owners, okay, and so, I'm sorry, so we're limiting it to a property or to a,
A property.
Per applicant, I would say, because
Yeah.
the property owner could make a repair to the roof gable
Right.
of the
so if it's
So
a
it's a
three,
property.
versus.
right, so if it's a 3-year program though, and let's say
We should only
year
allow once.
one, property owner of building A comes in, merchant, you know, in property A comes in, they're each able to do it. If the merchant changes over and in year 3 there's a new merchant, they can
Well, are
apply
we
for another
funding a new
thing?
merchant? A new merchant comes in 3 years who hasn't been through any of the construction, are we now paying for them to do their
So that
signs?
was another piece of it, right?
Yeah, vacant
should-
storefront, absolutely, we would want.
I'm not talking about a vacant storefront, but let's say,
Why-
let's
but
say
that's the-
Bridges
I'm
goes out
sorry,
and a
I'm-
new retail comes in, are we
I'm sorry,
paying for them to do
could
an
I
awning?
answer your question? You're talking over me for no reason. So my question is that we have vacant storefronts, so would a person coming in, if we're gonna encourage, you know, new development, new businesses coming into our downtown, would we want to extend that to a new merchant? Would that make a difference to them?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So, okay, so the merchant doesn't necessarily have to have gone through the
Well, that to
construction.
me is more a property owner, cause they'd want to enhance it to get a merchant to come in.
Either one of them
Or a
could be
merchant
done.
comes in and wants to do something because they're
Depends on the lease.
designing their space
Yeah.
and their look of their building.
So we're not to an applicant and there's no, okay, and there's no. So
Per
whether it be,
applicant, per
I don't know if
I
they can
think
do that,
it's-
a merchant comes in, I mean, unless the
One per
building owner
applicant.
wants them to. I don't know that they're gonna allow them to redo the front of the building, a
Well, a new
merchant,
awning,
someone
new
who's renting,
lights, new
not
facade.
not an awning.
Totally depends on your lease.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
exactly,
right.
so, yeah, but that's not something that we should
Right.
worry about.
Right.
Right, if the tenants can, according to their lease, make an enhancement of this thing.
I agree, but I think it's a slippery slope and we have to think about it. I
Right,
think
so
a vacant store,
great.
one thing, you're trying to get somebody in, but somebody who's coming in to replace somebody who's here 2.5 years from now, I don't know that we wanna be funding their new awning or sign.
why not?
Yeah, I
Let's
think we
do-
absolutely do, because, you know, we have sign guidelines that will be a part of the form-based code.
But we
So-
always have sign guidelines.
Yes, but there will be specific and new design guidelines around signs that are included in the form-based code. So allowing that new merchant to upgrade their sign to come into compliance with that, is something I think we would want to incentivize.
Then what's the difference if someone comes in 2 years and 10 months versus 3 years and 1 month?
Bad luck.
We
Yeah.
set a timeline for it.
We at the last meeting, we thought it was important to have a sunset date on this, so we chose a sunset date. But there is also the provision in here that we can extend it further if we feel that it's successful and we need to extend it
I
further.
mean, I think there should be one per applicant, right? And so an applicant can't apply for more than one of these,
Right.
regardless of whether they wanna do one each year.
Or if they have multiple buildings?
So it's one per applicant per property, per phase?
Per property.
Yeah,
So it's one per applicant, per property, per phase.
yeah.
Per what?
Phase,
Oh,
you have phase one, phase two.
Sure.
I just worry, where do you get to the point where you're kind of enriching a private citizen at the, you know what? Seriously, I'm allowed to ask questions that are fiscally responsible. Where do you get to the point where you are enhancing a private citizen versus enhancing your general taxpayer base?
If it's being used for interior parts of the building or parts of the building that are not visible from the public area. And we've addressed that by making sure that it, very opposite is here, that it's gotta be the facade and visible from a public area.
Because then it has a public good.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct, yes. Similar to the criteria on historic preservation tax credits, that it's gotta be something that
And
benefits
this
the
is,
public.
I mean, this is how we came up with this
This
program
was in
in
the
the
first
first place, right? Was that, merchants were saying, isn't there anything that you can do? Isn't there any way that you can help us? Because, we wanna be able to do this and that, and, in research, what we found to be sort of a legally permissible way to provide direct assistance to merchants and property owners is through the facade, which has a public purpose in that it enriches and enlivens.
Right, the
entire
aesthetics, the
thing.
viability of the area, yes, and that's what we've done in other communities that we've done a similar program for, yes.
Okay,
Okay.
Beacon?
so we're not alone in this.
Yes.
Beacon's really nice, I like Beacon. So we're not
No,
alone
no,
actually, so.
Oh, not at all.
This is
No,
not
there's
uncharted
a
territory.
lot of examples.
We're not
of
I'm aware, I'm just
Yeah.
saying it out loud
Yeah.
in a public meeting, yeah. This
Yeah,
is
no,
not
no, we're
something-
not alone, I just think, okay.
Keep telling her to go home, she goes, I just wanna wait until the conversation's over, I'm like.
Okay.
Alright, I think those are reasonable things, if anything else we should bring up so that we can add to this,
No, but as you think of things, it would be great if we could just put a list together or just mark it up so that when we come in on the third for a conversation, we have all these notes and we can take and incorporate it and, present to you what it's gonna look like.
yeah, this was my big one that I was gonna bring up, one per,
Yeah, that was good.
property owner
Good catch.
per, sorry.
Holocaust Human Rights Committee, first annual essay.
Yes, so we have, Ally and Stacy, who are the co-chairs, Ally Rosenberg and Stacy Science, who are the co-chairs of the Newcastle Holocaust and Human Rights Committee, were not able to be here tonight because they are hosting an event at Chapac, which we wish them great success with. And it was fabulous, it sounded fabulous. But so anyway, so the committee has, along with the Horace Greeley Enough Committee, has created a writing and art contest. And they have design guidelines that are, they have guidelines that are here, judging criteria, specific questions that are asked for the essay contest. And they are doing awards for middle school students and for high school students, and they are asking the town for a contribution towards those awards, which I think was a total of, Jill, remind me, $750? $700, yeah.
700.
Oh no, the total prize money is $700, and we're
Yeah, we'd be
asking
$350.
the town for $350.
Yep.
I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, and there's boards and commissions line, so we have a funding source.
Yeah, and the fact that we're splitting it with the school or fundraising from the school,
That's true.
I think that's right. Yep.
Request for the extension of the TCF?
Yes, so the original town board resolution back in 2014, I think it was, stated language that with respect to issuance of certificates of occupancies, that they could not be issued, even a TCO, until the Roybrook Road Route 117 improvements were completed. As we know, those improvements were not, required a modification to a resolution. So each time Chappaqua Crossing said, well, we don't quite have the improvements ready, the town board had to adopt a resolution to amend the prior resolution to allow for TCOs to be issued or continue to be issued, because TCOs only have a limited lifespan. The language back in June of this year included language that, and it was always the intent that once the improvements were completed, no more town board action would be necessary because they had completed the improvements in compliance with the original condition, and they wouldn't have to come back and get approvals from a town board for TCOs to be issued, or COs to be issued or extended, and that it would go back to being done administratively as it is with all projects by the building inspector. That was the intent in the June language, that was everyone's understanding when we adopted it back in September. A question was raised by both the applicant and at the staff level as to whether, given some language in the September resolution, whether it carried through what was stated back in June. Rather than having the record a bit murky, which I was advocating that we just acknowledge that was our intent and not get further board approvals, the conventional wisdom was, let's bring it back, let's make it clean on the record, have the town board adopt a resolution that further extends the TCO and says that any future extensions will be done administratively. And that it doesn't have to keep coming back to the town board because those roadway intersection improvements have been completed. So, and the roadway intersection improvements were reviewed by Bob Cioli and Jerry Morchell, who found that, subject to the submission of an as-built plan and some minor technical administrative matters, the intersection was working and operating and constructed in accordance with the approved plans. So if the board is comfortable with that approach, at your next meeting, I would have a resolution that basically says TCOs are extended, any further extensions or issuance of TCOs can be done by the building inspector as per the normal procedures.
Can you refresh my memory, did the last time we did that now have to include the improvements at the Sawmill River
No,
Parkway?
the improvements at the sawmill were part of a prior approval, but the issuance of TCOs was never linked to the improvements down at the sawmill.
Okay.
And we're holding the cash bond and
Right.
they had extended that date out. And I think Bob's been working with state on monitoring those.
Okay, and do we know why there's still so many cones around where these improvements are supposed to have been finished?
Yes, no, we don't, and we actually, asked.
Bob was reaching out to Dave Walsh today about that.
To find out, like, if they're done,
If they're done, their cones shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
seem to make sense. So we'll get you an answer before the resolution's on next Tuesday.
So is there anything else missing that they're supposed to do, and that's why, I mean,
Well, they have a lot of things to do, we're still working on the
Yeah.
Annandale path,
Oh, I see.
Plans
It's
are
just
on.
that this intersection appears to be finished, save for
I got
the
it.
literal cones.
Yeah, because the
Right.
town board town board and planning board don't routinely get involved in whether a TCO or CO should
Right.
be issued.
Right,
It's done by
right,
the building inspector. This was a particular case where we wanted to make sure those improvements were done,
Right.
and that's why we have that language in there.
Is there any downside of extending?
No.
No,
Why don't we gotta kick out every business that's
I
there?
just wanted to make sure.
Do not want to do that.
Okay.
Thank you, so we'll prepare that.
That's great, okay, alright.
That concludes your work session?
No, wait, just a couple of admin items.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have some questions.
Okay, I hope you have one on 586 King Street,
Yeah, that would
because
be
Lori has
correct.
been so patient.
That would be correct. Right, so, you know what, before I interrupted your, where you gonna start?
No, go ahead.
Right, so how does a Newcastle, right, this is Newcastle landmark designation, so can anyone put that forth, or does it have to come forth from a particular group?
So our landmark
What's-
advisory committee
Right.
takes and evaluates properties based upon its age, architectural significance, integrity of the the original building, some owners move into an old house and totally, modernize it, and so that we can do, but Gray is probably going to be the the better person to ask all those questions too when he comes and presents the
Got it.
public hearing.
So from our perspective then, he's gonna put together a proposal of why he feels as though this should be a Newcastle landmark. What's our criteria then for deciding up or down, and is there public input, and how does this work?
Yep, so there is a public hearing held, and it's funny because Gray's had communications with me where he's proposed, if you will, I don't wanna call it a cheat sheet, but a guide to the historic preservation law, so that it will explain to the process for criteria and the benefits of the law. And so we're in the process of putting that together. He's given us a very good draft
That'd be
to
great,
work
cause
with.
I am curious if speaking of people in the room,
Yeah.
how much input into that the actual property owner has into.
Oh, they have to approve.
It needs the property owner's
Yeah.
consent.
Got it.
So we've actually had an instance where the property owner didn't want it because they were afraid that it would hinder their ability to do renovations to the property. Our law actually doesn't. But you know, New York City landmarks absolutely do, so people get a little gun shy when they hear, oh, landmark
Sure.
preservation.
So then the question becomes, what are the pros and cons other than having a label on a particular home? Does it?
Bragging rights,
Yeah,
you know,
that's it.
people, you know, owners saunter a little bit, you know, more than the rest of us do. It's too-
But yet
No
there's,
intent to saunter.
And I'll provide you,
They saunter.
the code does have a criteria, and I'll provide the board with an initial draft of the memo and guidelines that we're working on, so that will answer a lot of your questions.
Are there guidelines, I mean, because is there any document that's for property owners?
That's the intent of this, that's the intent of what,
Who's the document for?
the document is for the property owner.
Okay,
And that was Gray's intent, was to
Yeah.
sort of demystify this process, explain it, and use it as a
Right.
piece so that property owners would understand.
because, you know, because it's a little out of the blue for us. I have to say, like, we had a conversation with Gray like over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, where he wanted to take some pictures for the graveyard tour. And they did, we talked about the house a little bit, and then he's like, I'm gonna do some research. Okay, 2.5 years later, you know, we get a letter last week and it's on the agenda for tonight.
Oh,
So,
maybe they didn't approve.
you know, so
That
like,
doesn't
I'm not,
sound
you know,
like- Yeah,
so it's
no,
crazy.
it is not. That is my.
So that's all, and so,
Maybe-
you know, so
maybe
we
2
got the
years ago
letter
they-
and thought
they
like,
said,
okay, now we need to do our due diligence about what this actually entails for the property.
They get a really nice
Didn't
bronze
know I
plaque.
had to
And that
like,
goes to my
you know,
question about
have
the
an answer
process.
for today, or,
That goes to my question about the process.
It's
like,
interesting, so
when,
funny-
at what point in time, like,
Yeah,
should
yeah.
we get that approval first? But
So-
meanwhile, this
so
document
yeah,
that's been put together makes sense.
Usually the property owner's like sitting in the room if they're here.
Exactly, all the past ones have had the property owner's
Yeah.
consent.
Yeah, completely and totally, and and usually he reaches out to the, which, so I apologize, I'm not really sure, usually when he does all this, there's maybe he does need more people in his committee.
we got a letter from him last week.
Yeah.
So the public hearing
And-
cannot be convened or noticed until we have your consent.
Until we can.
Ah,
Okay.
so I think,
Yeah, so we didn't reply to the letter yet, because we were like both out of town.
Right,
That's
right.
okay.
I'm guessing that Lori would like to understand the implications of
Sense I'm getting, yes.
TMD,
Alright.
which is.
Yeah,
So
sounds
we'll
good.
reach out to you.
I mean, we're big fans of the house.
Right. No, absolutely, you should absolutely understand what the implications are, so we'll get that information to you.
Thank you.
So we're gonna hold off on that application.
So Gray's suspicion that we should have such guidance in place was good.
That's it.
He set it up this way to prove his point.
Yeah,
It's very clever.
Although he did announce it, the last time he gave a presentation, he told us that the next thing he was working
He
on
absolutely did,
was,
yes, which is why
and
we.
and I said, oh, that's Laura Warren's house.
Yeah, it was at the
Yeah.
Chappaqua Crossing,
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
I remember that,
And so, you know, so there you go, okay, well, so much for assuming,
Alright.
sorry about that.
Right, parkway lights.
So it's for town hall parking lot and the walkway lights out in the back because they are moving along so quickly that we have the conduit set, but we'd like them to be able to pour the concrete foundations for the lights, but we have to figure out what lights we want because there's a bolt pattern that gets
Into the cement.
into the cement, so just, yeah, anyway, so they need to know what
So
the
these are
lights
gonna be
look like.
permanent.
They're going
light
to be
fixtures.
permanent lights, there's gonna be bollard lights that line the walkway from the playground to the commuter parking lot. And we're gonna have new lights out in the back parking lot, which is awfully dark, so we're actually very excited about that.
Yes.
Is this already in the budget, Jill?
Yeah. The next is the tax certiorari proceeding for Roberta. And the next is interesting,
I saw that, I was
service
like,
agreement
wait.
for, partners in safety. And if you'd like, I can hold on to this and see whether or not we might be able to do 6 months. I don't know that we have a lot of options
That is correct.
with
They're
them.
very few companies.
I think that we're, Lance's comment was, well, after you bashed them, and I said, well, I didn't actually bash them, you did, I think that we are just in a little bit of a.
That wasn't exactly, good.
Whatever. But anyway, I don't really know what our options are, I could see whether or not we can do a 6 month with another 6 month, I think they generally do 1 year. And according to the letter that we had to get this back to them by February 15th in order not to, still have our,
I mean, is there anything in the contract that we should change to prevent things that we don't want happening from happening?
So I have to take a look at that, I mean, nothing prevents us from going to, nothing prevents us from seeing whether or not other entities may be able to offer us additional services. But for what we primarily use them for, which is pre-employment physicals,
DOT.
yeah, DOT physicals, this is not a,
Yeah, on that front, like, again,
They
that's
are,
why
you
no
know-
one's using, we're moved to them
Yeah.
specifically because they're very good at that.
yeah, they are very good at that, they're tremendously accessible, they get you in, they get you out, they get the results right away.
And we've had issues with other vendors that you
Right.
can use
Yeah,
anywhere
that
near here.
literally, because our employees can't start until the physicals come through, so it's
Could
really
you-
important that we're able to, move this stuff along. But I think that there are other services that maybe other vendors can give to us.
Right, like could we maybe use them for all the physicals and all that and then pull out, let's say, drug and alcohol testing and see if there's another company that maybe.
Yeah, I may have to speak to the board about that separate.
Yeah, it's just a hypothetical.
Yeah,
Okay.
Right, cause there are other vendors, not a lot.
no, not a lot, and the problem is that we actually have a very stringent requirement. So when one of my plow drivers gets hits something, they go for testing, they have to come off the road and they have to go for testing. Any of my drivers get into an accident. If you don't have someone who's available on a 24/7,
You got a problem.
that driver's, they're gone.
Right.
For whatever, and it's, it can mean that they're out of work for several days before you get any test results back, so it's very problematic for us. We are, we're very stringent in our requirements. We need to be able to ensure that alcohol or drugs is never a contributing factor in any accidents that happen, and we just don't, unless somebody hits our driver.
Yeah.
It's without exception.
Yeah, no, of course.
So we've been, and we've been very happy with them about that. There also is this new federal motor carrier safety and drug alcohol clearinghouse effect that just went into effect. That is going to change the way reporting occurs. And I think that may make these testing, these results a little bit more stringent than they have been in the past. So.
easier to access.
Yes, and much easier to access. Where now there's going to be a record of it, so let's say you hire a new employee, if there's been an incident in the past, that carries with them. As opposed to leaving a job and having a new person come in, they're, everybody's fine, great, and you have no idea that something happened in the past and that's why they're left there.
Right. but maybe we should see if they are the ones we wanna continue using, if there's anything we need to change in the contract so that unintended circumstances don't arise.
Right, and if you notice with their letter, they talk about the fact that driver's licenses will now be required in lieu of social security numbers or employee IDs. So they can track the driver's license, which is really what you wanna do. So, yes.
So I think maybe we should move forward with approving this
Right,
for
and
this
I
year,
think so. Yes.
and then over the course of this year, we should think about what are
Right, and see whether or not they
other
can address
options
some
and
of
things we
our,
need to
our issues.
But
I
weren't
think
we
that's
talking
fair.
about maybe doing a 6-month, you just said we might be able to do that.
We may be able to do 6 months, I don't know, the only thing I have here in front of me is a year and we're already beyond, I
Right,
needed it back
which is
by
why,
February
yeah.
15th.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little concerned. I don't know why it is that it just came to us.
Yeah, when did they
December
just send
11th.
it to you?
Yeah, last week, we just got this,
Right,
but it's
so-
in December 14 and received it.
Right.
I have no explanation. Okay, we actually have a town board meeting in the other. I think so, is Michael here? Yes, he's here, is Melanie, what is that? NCCFC is set up to.
No, no, just, no,